Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and welcome to the 21st episode of Good Timin. As always on this podcast, we're going to be talking about one of our favorite bands, the Beach Boys. And on today's show, we're going to be covering an album that is one of the most maligned records in the Beach Boys discography, and it's one that doesn't really receive a lot of love from both fans and critics alike. However, I personally feel that this album has some very nice moments on it, as well as a few really great songs that I feel are often overlooked by fans. And I don't think that this album deserves the amount of hate and flack that it gets from people. So, of course, the album that I'm talking about is the group's 1978 release, the M.I.U. album. And as we've done on our previous album episodes, we're going to be discussing the album's history and background and how it came together. We'll also do a track by track rundown of the album and share our thoughts on each of the individual songs. And then towards the end of the episode, we're also going to be covering some of the outtakes from around this time, as well as the band's rejected Christmas album from the same year, which is known as Merry Christmas from the Beach Boys. So that should be interesting. So for today's episode, I'm joined by my fellow tortured poets of Riley, Justin, and Matt, as well as our unofficial fifth member, Nate. So as always, I'm glad to have you guys here, and I'm looking forward to discussing the polarizing album with you all. So before we get into the history of the album, do you guys want to quickly share some of your general thoughts and opinions on the M.I.U. album?
Yeah, I'll start. I think it's a bit unfairly maligned, as you mentioned. It's maligned. I think there are some really good cuts on here, but it kind of has that slick adult contemporary feel to it, kind of yacht rocky, which is fine in parts of it, but like parts of it I do think are kind of dull. And I think the cover doesn't help either because it's a very dull corporate looking cover. Not that I think this band, I'll be honest, I don't think this band is really known for having amazing album covers to begin with. I think Pet Sounds is usually cited as a great example of a shitty album cover, but it's a great album. I know some people may disagree, but I don't think it's the worst, but it's not, the best either. So I'm looking forward to talk about this. Like I like it more than I think like some of the critics like it, but I would never rank it as like my favorite album in the discography or anything, but I don't think it's their worst either. So I'm looking forward to discussing it.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that like this one it doesn't do a whole lot for me. But I do like them kind of going into that adult contemporary sound of the late 70s. I think it was perfected a bit on the next album. Even though that one's arguably more spotty. But there's some solid cuts on here. I kind of see this more as a transitional album than like an actual like I guess artistic cut because I feel like you're kind of coming off the Brian's Back era and just kind of into that adult contemporary pop era that they kind of entered from this album all the way to like I guess Summer in Paradise. Um, but it's all right. There's always just been a couple of tracks that I like on here. I'm not too crazy about it, but I don't think there's anything on. There's one song on here that I do think is bad, but I think the rest is just solid a late 70s pop, and I can at least appreciate it. And fuck you, Jake.
So my opinion on this album, this is one where I can totally kind of like love you. I can totally see like why people don't care for it. Like I totally get it. Like again, the production, it's that very slick production, like you mentioned, Matt. Like again, it's got kind of that yacht rock, soft rock sound. And I mean, I can see why people don't think that's the most interesting thing. I can remember I initially didn't care for this album much, but like a lot of their albums over time, it's just really grown on me. I don't like every track on it. I think there's definitely some very weak songs on it. But there's also some really solid cuts as well, especially on the second half. There's a really like great run of songs. I feel like from like Pitter Patter through My Diane and Match Point. Like I feel like that's a great 3 song run there. So I'm looking forward to talking about this album. I think a lot of people, like I said earlier, I think a lot of people are a little overly critical on this album, and I think part of that is because of like knowing where the band was at that time. Obviously, like this was a very rough period for them. There was a lot of fighting going on. And I think a lot of people kind of consider this the start of like the end of the band's era as like an innovative band. Like they're starting to go more towards like the nostalgia side of things. So I can get why critics ragged on this album, but personally, I think it has a lot of charm and I enjoy it for what it is. I think it has some nice cuts on it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I think you hit the nail on the head, Jake, that it really does pick up speed in its second portion. And like when I was re-listening today, I found myself struggling a bit to get through the beginning and then really enjoying like the latter half. And I really like what Riley said that it was very transitionary and it's sort of one foot in the territory of what they had been doing throughout the 70s with sort of creative pop music. And then the other foot in that sort of like surf revival nostalgia kind of thing. So it's not really as consistent as a lot of their albums. It's very like eclectic and varies from song to song.
I would agree with that as well too. It is kind of spotty. Some of the tracks are weaker than others. I feel this album was kind of rushed, even though it wasn't really when you look at the dates and stuff. Um, but I feel that this album's growing on me, especially after last week. We're not going to talk about that right now. Last Friday. But yeah, I'm just glad that we do have this album because there is some great music on it as well, and Brian's still on it as well too. So we have to be thankful for that.
That's true, yeah, because Brian, I think, co-wrote at least half of the songs, right? I think even more. So he's definitely
Yeah.
Let me
over
get the
it.
record out. Let's
I was
see.
gonna say that it's kind of like in a weird way, almost a return to form, where because the past, I guess, 5 or 6 years in the band's history, I mean, Brian and Mike weren't really writing a lot of songs.
half the
and
album,
then
yeah.
this kind of
Yeah.
revives that whole partnership. And then I feel
That-
like you see that again in the next one, and so on and so forth. Like it kind of revives that partnership. I don't think it's to the same success.
I will say with that said though, I've read that like even though they were writing together, Brian didn't really want to be writing together. Like I think I read like he was kind of sick of all of the band at this point. So
Yeah,
I think it was kind of one of those things where like Mike was kind of pushing him to be like, yo, like, come on, Brian, let's write some songs, and Brian was like, oh, fuck it, like whatever.
I feel it was more apart from one another as well too, because from what Gary Griffin said in one of his interviews, I think last year he said this, that the way that the songs were composed were basically Brian came up with the chords, he played it to the guys in the studio, and then everybody kind of made like a chord chart kind of thing. And then they compared chord charts to one another. Is this what you heard? Is this what you heard? And then they make the track from that basically. And then I
Yeah,
guess Mike put his words on top of that. So I think it was kind of like it wasn't as together as you think it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Dennis and Carl, they weren't really involved in this too much, right? Other than the songs that they sing the vocals on, and those were like older cuts, if I'm not mistaken. Because I know Dennis famously said that one quote about it, and I don't think Carl really liked it too much either.
I can tell you that both came once. Carl came for a couple days, and Dennis was there for a day. I think he played drums on "She's Got Rhythm," like a little bit, not the whole thing.
And I read that like Carl, like he does do backing vocals on quite a few of the tracks, but like again, like normally when you think of like Beach Boys albums from around this time, like you think like a lot of Carl lead vocals and some Carl written songs, and it's like there's very little. I mean, there's literally one song he's even on like lead on. I know he sings a little bit of Hey Little Tomboy too, but I mean there's not much. So
Yeah.
all right, so now before we get into some of the specific details behind the recording of M.I.U., I thought it would be good to first provide some general facts and background about the album, in case any of our listeners aren't super familiar with the record or just need a refresher. So the M.I.U. album was released on September 25th, 1978, and was the band's 22nd studio album. It was also their last for Brother Reprise Records. The band would switch to CBS for their following albums. So most of the album was recorded in late 1977 at Maharishi International University in Fairfield, Iowa, which is where the album's name comes from. Two notable things about this album was that it was primarily produced by Al Jardine and touring member Ron Altbach. Ron was formerly in the band King Harvest and also toured with Mike Love's offshoot band Celebration in the late 70s. And it's also notable in that, like you guys said, Carl and Dennis Wilson aren't really on this album much at all. Carl sings lead on Sweet Sunday Kind of Love and part of Hey Little Tomboy, and Dennis sings lead on My Diane. But besides that, their contributions are pretty limited, especially when you compare them to most of the other Beach Boys 70s albums. And of course, the main reason why both Carl and Dennis aren't really on this album was because there was a lot of fighting going on within the band at this time. The group was pretty much split into two separate camps. You had Mike and Al on one side and Dennis and Carl on the other. And both sides had pretty different ideas for what direction the band should be going in. Al and Mike were more focused on touring and the commercial side of things, while Carl and Dennis still wanted the band to keep moving in kind of a more progressive direction and like doing more creative material on their albums. Carl and Dennis were also both drinking and doing drugs around this time, while Mike and Al weren't. So that was also causing quite a bit of tension within the group. Brian had initially not sided with either of the two pairings, but the band had a meeting at his house after a big fight. And that meeting pretty much determined that they decided that Brian would side with Mike and Al on all of the band's decision making, like with the votes. They would have like votes on like different issues and different directional like ways the band wanted to go. And they determined that Brian's vote would always go the side of Mike and Al. So that caused additional tension as well. So this was definitely not a happy time for the band during the making of this album. In terms of the music on M.I.U., most of the songs, like you guys said, have a sort of easy listening soft rock sound. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of fans find this album to be a bit boring and unmemorable. Again, though, I do think that musically there's some pretty strong tracks in M.I.U., and I think that the mellow production does suit some of the songs well, which we'll get into some of those in a bit. Commercially, this album did not do well at all. Peaked at number 151 on the U.S. charts, which
Same
made
as
it their worst
Sunflower.
album since Sunflower, which unfortunately also, yes, charted the exact same position, which is really unfortunate. And critically, the album didn't go over well either, but we can get into some more of that later on. So hopefully that was a decent enough introduction for those of our listeners who aren't too familiar with M.I.U. So now to get into some more about the album's recording history and background, I'm going to pass things over to Justin. So Justin, do you want to kind of talk about how the M.I.U. album came together and some of the drama that was going on within the band around that time?
Right. There's a lot of stuff going on here. It might be kind of confusing to go through, but I'm going to start off where we ended off the last time with Love You. That was in April 77 when that was released. Uh, at that point, they're kind of flying high on their CBS deal. They got like a lot of money to record for CBS, but they were also behind um, one album for Warner Brothers as well too. So they had to get back to work. But there was a little bit of an incident that happened. They were kind of touring throughout the summer. Basically, Mike was gone away to Switzerland. I think I talked about this in the Love You episode as well too. To basically learn how to levitate with the Maharishi. So he was gone for about 6 months throughout early 1977, and then he came back in I think it was believe it was June, and they had planned this big UK tour. And in the meantime, Mike's brother had been fired by the band, and this guy named Henry Lazarus came on board, and he was the new manager for the band. He was supposed to set up this UK tour for the band and get them like their hotels, get the venues booked, and all this other stuff. And he didn't do it properly, and it basically screwed up the entire tour for them. They just got this big CBS deal, so it's like I don't know, it didn't sit well with UK fans. And not to mention, the band actually ended up going to the UK at the same time that they would have gone for their tour to go play in front of the industry people at the CBS convention, which was kind of a slap in the face to fans too. But yeah, they didn't take it very well at all. And if you look at the news articles around that time, like British fans were really upset at the band. They almost left them at that point. So then they're kind of going through a rocky summer. They're touring throughout August, September. September is when the tarmac fight happened. I think I mentioned a little bit about this in another episode as well too. I won't really go into too much detail, but basically, like Jake said, they kind of split off into two different camps where it was Dennis and Carl, and it became Al, Mike, and Brian, and they had that big meeting at Brian's house to kind of say where is the direction of the band heading. And in that meeting as well, too, every member had lawyers with them. Like each member had their own lawyer with them. So it was quite a heated uh, meeting from what I've read, anyways. And then it was decided after that meeting that they're going to build a studio in Maharishi International University, which was a school, and kind of get away from all of the drugs and all the excesses of LA, and to go to Fairfield, Iowa, which is very, very different compared to LA. So they were building the studio throughout October and early November while they were touring, while the band was touring. And of course, they're still kind of infighting because of that tarmac fight. It's still kind of like shaking things up a bit. I should also mention, too, around September is when Dennis's solo album came out, Pacific Ocean Blue. That was kind of another thing that they were kind of fighting about. It seems like everybody was kind of jealous over that from what I've read. So they ended up going to Fairfield, Iowa, right around like November, early November, I'd say. Like November 14th is the first day I have as a recording. They were originally going to call this album California Feeling as well. And Brian requested that song be not included on the album. That was kind of his idea, to call it that, but not have the song on the album. So this was a really fruitful period for them. They recorded a lot of stuff. They recorded not only that album, they were recording a Christmas album for Warner Brothers to kind of give them as a send off. basically. Um, they were recording some American Spring stuff because everybody was there. Like Rocky was there, Marilyn and Diane, who were American Spring now. Rocky, Marilyn, Diane. That was the band at the point, and also the celebration stuff as well too. So it was a lot of recording. Sometimes there'd be up to 3 sessions a day, depending on what they were trying to finish. That was the 14th to the 18th. And then November 18th to 20th, they played a few university shows. And then they came back and did a bit more recording at M.I.U. for a few more days. Meanwhile, Dennis is working on Bamboo, his follow up to Pacific Ocean Blue, away from the band, back in LA. He's not even in Iowa at all. The final run of M.I.U. sessions was the 2nd to 4th of December. And then December 13th, there was a sweetening session at the last minutes at K. Smith, Seattle, while they're touring. That's when Dennis's vocal for Diane went on, because that was an older track. And some of the other overdubs they did in Seattle when they were on a tour stop. So then they finished all this recording. December 24th is they assembled this master for CBS called California Feeling. This was supposed to go to CBS, this album, and it was rejected. So then December 29th, they put together another master for CBS, and that was rejected, California Feeling. So now we're into 1978, and they're like way behind on getting Warner Brothers an album because Warner's had already rejected that Christmas album. They didn't want it. And they owed an album to CBS as well too. So I must say though, reading their itinerary, they're not really moving too fast with this. It's pretty stretching out pretty long. That's why I said it seems like this album's rushed, but it's really not. Like it went on for quite a long time. 1978, Dennis is still continuing the Bamboo sessions. And then February 22nd, they go do 2 sessions at Wally Heider's in LA to do more overdubs on the songs, on the M.I.U. songs. And then late February to March is that disastrous Australian tour that I think every Beach Boys fan knows about that was like really bad. Like they almost ruined their entire reputation there. I'm not going to get too much into that because we can do a whole episode on that. But and then after that, they mastered the album, the M.I.U. album, on April 20th. And this album actually was mastered again. It was mastered the first time, and I believe this April 20th mastering is the Epic CD, the first one, the Caribou CD. How it's missing like overdubs and stuff on it. I believe this is that tape. Don't quote me on it, but I believe it is.
I think you're right. I think you're right because I think I remember reading that in the Hoffman forums that they like found they used like the wrong tape or something, and then sometimes intentionally they'll use different tapes. They did that on the I was off topic, but the Ryko Young Americans. They use different different tapes for some of the songs. It was kind of interesting.
So then the May 8th, Almost Summer, the soundtrack is released. So they had done those tracks also at M.I.U. as well. So that was released on May 8th of 1978. And then at the end of June, they do more overdub sessions at Wally Heider to kind of fix things, I guess. And then June 29th, M.I.U. is remastered again. So this is the remaster that we know, like that went on the vinyl, that went on all the copies around the world, basically, June 29th. And then August 28th, Peggy Sue, backed by Hey Little TomBoy as a single, was released. It went to number 59 in the US, number 97 in Australia, and number 61 in Canada. So I just want to go over some of the track listings for the original California Feeling, because not a lot of people know that. Oh, wait, I missed 2 things. Sorry. August 28th, they started recording LA and Miami at Criteria, basically. So they had started recording the next album before M.I.U. was released on the 25th of September. So the first master of California Feeling goes like this: Sweet Sunday's Kind of Love, Match Point of Our Love, Bells of Paris, Winds of Change, My Diane, It's Over Now from Adult Child, She's Got Rhythm, Shortened Bread, Our Team, Kona Coast, How's About a Little Bit of Your Sweet Lovin', and Won't You Come Out Tonight. That was rejected. Now that's the second one. which was assembled a few days later. Match Point of Our Love, Pitter Patter, Sweet Sunday Kind of Love, Bells of Paris, Winds of Change, My Diane, She's Got Rhythm, Our Team, Hey Little Tomboy, which was added then on the second master. Kona Coast, Won't You Come Out Tonight, and How's About a Little Bit of Your Sweet Love, and it's still on there. So that's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'd have preferred that first generation master sequence the most, I think.
Yeah, it has some really interesting tracks. Like It's Over Now. I didn't expect that to be on there.
That would have been the highlight for me.
That would have been, yeah. That was rejected by CBS.
Well, I mean, I know a lot of we've said this before on this podcast. I've seen other Beach Boys fans say it too, but it's like of all of the adult child stuff, the one track that made it was the one that is the one that for a lot of people is the most despised, the most hated song on there. Which again, I've said my stuff on that song, but I mean, it's an interesting decision. Over Now would have been an awesome ballad to put on there. Really moving song. It would have fit well with like a song like My Diane too, which obviously made the album. So I mean, I feel like that would have been a great addition, and it definitely would have been good to like if they had put that over some of the songs that actually did make it.
That's what I was saying. Imagine if you made a double album, because I know you were saying, oh, they were struggling for material, but they had so much crap in the vault. Imagine if you made like a double album and just put it out. I would have loved to see a Beach Boys double. Just saying.
But you won't be able to make the box sets 50 years later.
Yeah.
I guess.
They were thinking long term.
Yeah. Long-term investment, right?
That was interesting how the second one you said Justin opened with Match Point. I never heard that. It's interesting.
That's what it says on the tape.
That's a weird song to open up a side of a record, but
I could see it.
I guess. I mean,
it would have been Match Point as the opener for side one, and She's Got Rhythm would have been the opener for side two.
Well, I don't know. She's Got Rhythm. I get. We'll get to that, but anyway.
Nate, anything you want to add from this period for history wise that Justin didn't mention?
Well, that was a really, really great rundown, and yeah, I would just say that it's interesting that the celebration stuff was happening simultaneously, because some of that material, as well as some of the members of that group, kind of floated their way onto this album, and there was like a lot of crossover, and for that reason, I sort of think of the Almost Summer album as sort of like a brother or sister album to M.I.U.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
And in fact, I do think the album could have been improved with some of the best songs from that Almost Summer album. I guess the main thing I would want to interject too is it's just really, really fascinating that it took this long, but that this is probably the first and only album where the majority of the decision making fell onto Al's shoulders, and he wasn't so much a teammate but like a leader in this project. And I think I said this during our Al episode, but the key to unlocking my enjoyment of this album has been to view it as Postcard from California Part 1, because I see a lot of overlap in the arrangements, and sort of like easy listening, a lot of acoustic guitars and keyboards. So once I made that connection and saw those albums as kind of related, I felt like I got it more.
I think that's fair. What I was going to say was, going back to we mentioned Pacific Ocean Blue, I'll say this. If I had the I like this album for what it is, but to me, Pacific Ocean Blue, my opinion, better than anything the Beach Boys put out post Holland, easily. I think it's a masterpiece. I know we're probably having an episode. I think so. I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's so heartfelt. It's so amazing. I think, it really shows that I don't think they appreciated Dennis enough, especially after he died and Mike spent years rewriting the history about Dennis, which I just thought was awful. But, Al, I love you, but I don't think you had the best ideas for this one.
Well, I was going to say, Al produced the vocals on this one. It was Ron Altbach who did pretty much all the music for it.
Yeah, Ron Altbach.
Oh, interesting.
Ron Altbach kind of, I don't know. Some of it I like, some of it not so much, but we'll get to that.
I had never heard before that it was so like split up
right down the
middle.
in the Beach Boys book that came out. It was part of the M.I.U section. It said that Ron did the backing tracks and the instrumentals, and Al produced the vocals. And I think it was actually Al who said that.
It was more split up than we think, basically.
Yeah. Hold on.
It was like Brian with the musicians, and then the vocals were done separately.
It sounds like it was very honestly made in like the way most modern music is made, where instead of the entire song already being conceived by the time they were recording it, this
Yeah.
was sort of like how they do it today, where the songs are pretty much written and
Yeah.
pieced together as they were recorded.
Or they're written in writing camps. That's a big thing now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It was more of like a feel thing, like this is the feel I want for this song kind of thing. And then Brian would
Maybe
just play it.
maybe this is how they were ahead of their time. They're doing albums by committee.
It's true. It's true.
No, it does say, and it says, "Ow." For M.I.U, the Beach Boys keyboardist Ron Outback produced the tracks, and I produced the vocals.
Okay.
Which
Straight
I
from
feel
the-
like makes a lot more sense, especially if you look at songs like Lady Linda.
Yeah.
In the future, that adds up. That this was more of like Ron Outback's like sound, especially on tracks like Winds of Change and Bells of Paris and
Right.
Yeah, and Ron was one of the main guys in Celebration too, so that would explain that crossover.
Yep. There's
Just
the
wanna-
tracks too. Like there's multiple keyboardists too. I want to point out what Gary Griffin said last year when somebody asked him like, "What did you play exactly on the album?" And he said that he played organ most of the time. Brian was on piano, and it was Ron Altbach on the Wurlitzer on most of the tracks. So if anybody's interested in that, there you go.
I
I
just want to
love that stuff.
I just want to say one thing. I do like Love You as well. Just going back to what I was saying earlier. I'd probably put Love You about on par with Pacific Ocean Blue, but I would say, at least for me, I would say Pacific Ocean is a little bit more consistent. Just because Love You does have, I don't really like Love Is a Woman. That song is just, that was a terrible closer for it.
I like Beach Boys 85 better than both.
Well, that's your opinion. Beach Boys 85, I actually think is overhated. I wouldn't say it's better than either, but that's just my opinion.
All right. Want to get into the album track list now, guys?
Yes,
Let's
Please.
do it.
All right. So M.I.U, the first track on side one is She's Got Rhythm. So this song started, I believe, Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was originally instrumental cut from Almost Summer. It was like a backing track. And for M.I.U, they basically just used that backing track and put Brian's vocal over it. And it's an interesting vocal. The falsetto at the start is, we'll just call it interesting. It's definitely a bit of a jarring start to the album. Like, you know, the first thing listeners heard when they played this album was, so it's a very interesting way to start the album. But I think this song is actually a lot of fun. You can tell like there's a lot of energy in it, which I feel like a lot of the songs in this album, they kind of feel like they're lacking that energy. So I think that this song is kind of refreshing when you compare it to some of the other tracks on here that come later. I do like Mike's verse part where he's like talking in that like quieter voice and like it's got like that cool like backing instrumental during that part. I like that a lot. But I like the song. I do think it's a little bit jarring as an opener, but I do think it's a solid opener. So what do you guys think of She's Got Rhythm?
Yeah, I like the song, but I really do think that falsetto is like a jump scare almost. It's just, you don't expect it. And then it's like so off key at the beginning. It's just like, oh my God. But yeah, I do actually think it's a pretty fun song. I kind of like the lyrics too, you know, like disco dancing, foxy girl out on the floor. And I know I said this a bajillion times in the Beatles episode, but again, close your eyes. You can imagine this stuff. You know, we both ordered something to drink. I kind of like Mike's like laid back vocal delivery as well. I do think it works as an opener. I just wish that falsetto was a little bit more clean. I will say if this album was made today, they'd probably auto-tune that big time or Melodyne or whatever just to make it a little bit clean. But I think it works decently well as an opener, and it's a fun way to start the record.
I actually really enjoy this one. I do admit the falsetto at the beginning was pretty off-putting, but I've actually kind of grown to enjoy it. I think the chord changes on this one are pretty fun. And I don't think I think this is an example of where they were going, where maybe it's not like an artistic like statement like any of their previous albums, but for like what they've kind of been doing from here on out of just like adult contemporary music, I think this is a really fun song and I really enjoy it a lot. Like I said, the chord changes are pretty cool. I really like Mike's part on this one.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think Brian, even though he's like kind of coked out right now, I think his voice kind of actually brings this track up for me, and it just makes it more of a fun track than like anything too deep.
Well, also
I
too,
really like it.
I was gonna say it doesn't. Not every song has to be an artistic masterpiece, decipher the lyrics, whatever. Like, there's nothing wrong with making a song that's just fun. And this song is fun. Like you said, you could just put it on and dance around the turntable. Just don't bump into it like I did and drop the speaker on the floor.
I would accidentally bump into my turntable and Take a Load Off Your Feet comes on.
trying to scratch the record.
Oh no, I scratched up Surf's Up. But yeah, I think it's a fun track. I really like it. And I think as an opener, it's really cool. And it kind of sets the pace for what's going to come with this album and what comes next. It's just a lot of fun music. And that's okay.
It's okay.
Fun is it?
Yeah, I can't say I have a lot of strong feelings about this one. I do think it does what it sets out to do well in being like a pretty typical Beach Boys song, but with a little more current lyrics to the time period at least. Like it sounds like a Beach Boys song, no doubt, but the lyrics are a little more 70s fashion. And I guess my big takeaway that I haven't really made this connection before until just now, but the Beach Boys were playing concerts with Jane and Dean in 77 and 78. And Dean Torrance kind of is famous for having that just kind of let it rip, like wailing, sometimes even screeching falsetto that you can hear Dean sing with on Barbara Ann or the Jane and Dean song Linda, just like balls to the wall, kind of pitchy. And so maybe because of the fact that Brian was with Dean a lot during this time is what he was sort of channeling on the falsetto on this track.
Yeah. Wasn't he was doing all their album covers around this time, right?
Yeah, Dean did this one, in fact, too.
Yeah, he does have
So
credit for it.
He did 15 Big Ones, Love You, and this one, as well as stuff afterwards, too. But yeah, so I think I don't have any direct quotes to make that connection, but just knowing that Dean was around a lot during this time, I can sort of picture Brian doing a Dean kind of sound, because Brian was really changing his voice up a lot throughout the 70s and sort of doing almost impersonations.
This too.
Yeah. And so, yeah. And I do think it's interesting that it began as the Celebration instrumental, because it does work really well as an instrumental and it's like musically captivating even without lyrics. But yeah, it's fun and it's a good Beach Boy tune. Even if it doesn't completely knock my socks off, I'd take it over songs by most other groups.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you made that connection with Dean. I would have never thought of that. It's a fun track for me. I like the different textures. What I mean is like it's like a fun during the verse, and then during Mike's part, kind of like goes down a little bit. Like the music kind of like softens a bit, and then it goes back to the fun again. It's kind of gives the listener kind of something to. It's like fun, right? It's like it's something more than just like a static track, basically. I would not like to hear autotune on this at all, even the first note, because it would glitch out like crazy. I know from using autotune myself that it doesn't always track like pitchy stuff like that the best, and it sounds like really bad, usually if it's really pitchy. And I love that first note. It's great. Like how could you not love it? It's the Beach Boys in 1978, like they're older, they have a few miles on them. It's good.
Well, I think it just comes from like we are nowadays obsessed with perfection. And exactly. I think we've lost those imperfections that you used to find in old recordings and stuff. Like I noticed the comment one time on like Surf and Safari, you can hear Mike's voice crack. Nowadays that would be like re-recorded and taken out. Like everything now it's like we have the illusion of perfection. It's like when people put crap on their Instagram and it's like filtered and photoshopped to hell and back. That's just kind of how it is.
Because we have endless takes now, and back then, I mean, recording wasn't cheap.
Man. Well, tape was literally finite.
That's part of it, but that's part of it. But also, like, some of those old movies, like when they would cast an actor that couldn't sing, like Marlon Brando in Guys and Dolls, they would stitch the tape together line by line, and that's why it sounds the way it does. Same thing with Gloria Graham in Oklahoma. Same thing with Lucille Ball in Mame. So it was just a lot harder to do it back then. You could do it, but did you really want to spend all that time stitching tape together?
It was quite a laborious process back then too. Like even just splicing tape and like putting two different takes together, that takes quite a bit of effort.
Yeah, and now it's so easy, but you can tell too, like there are certain songs like This Boy, you can clearly hear the tape splice if you listen with good headphones.
And I wanted to add, I love the harmonies at the end where they're kind of like clapping along and like everybody's happy, and it's a happy song.
Yeah. No, one thing I wanted to say, Justin, I think like to like us, to like Beach Boys fans that like know this period, I can see how like that opening like vocal like can have like some charm to it. It's like, yeah, it's the 70s Beach Boys, like you said, But like to somebody that's not as familiar with the band and just like buying it like, oh, new Beach Boys record, let's give it a listen. Like that's how it opens. I just feel like if
And
you're
they'll
not
run.
where the band was at this time, which I mean, you've said, Justin, like a lot of people did kind of know at this point, like the band was not the same as they once were. But still, it must have been a little jarring, I have to think,
And they'll put it on the turntable, and then they'll go right back to the store to return it because they're like, "What the hell did I just buy?"
Yeah. One last thing I also love, this is something that kind of goes on throughout this album, but I love some of the cheesy backing vocals on this song. Like during Mike's verse where he's like, "We both ordered something to eat," and in the background,
to drink.
I always laugh at that. It was just funny. There's a couple other songs in here where that they have those cheesy backing vocals too, but I kind of think it's charming. So,
Yeah.
all right, we'll move on to the second track. And this is "Come Go With Me." So this is a cover, and it's a very well done cover. I think Al does an excellent vocal on this. I think he really owns it. Of course, Al's done some other really successful covers before too, like Cotton Fields. He really nails the vocal on that as well, and I really like this song a lot. I think it's a highlight of the album. I can see why it was when it was re-released as a single later on. I believe in like 1981, I want to say, around like 10 years of Harmony. And yeah, it's a really strong track. I think it's one of the highlights of the album, and it's one of the first songs I can remember like really clicking with me from this album. Like I can remember the first time I heard this, like, oh, I'm adding this to my Beach Boys playlist. This is really good. I enjoy it a lot. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. I do think it's a great cover. I do prefer it to Peggy Sue. I think Al did a great job on it. He sells it well. It's a very tastefully done cover. I really enjoy it.
I really like this one. It's one of the highlights of the album for me, and I actually prefer this one to the original in some aspects.
Yeah.
I definitely come back to this one more, and maybe it is just because it's the Beach Boys singing it, and I do like the Del Vikings version a lot, but I just come back to this one more. I think Al does all the vocals on this one, right? Or is that
vast
the
majority
Big Ones version?
Yeah, it started.
There's other
You
people on
explained it
backing
right, yeah.
vocals too.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I think this was, if there was any cover song for the Beach Boys to ever cover, this was the one to do. I feel like Al does an excellent job on this one. I think I really like it. I think it's a great cover. It's one of the best covers I've heard maybe ever. And it's probably the cover song I listen to the most of anybody. I really like it.
Yeah, I'd say there is like a certain point when a band's cover becomes so successful or eclipses the original so much that it becomes synonymous with them. And I hear this on oldies radio or out in stores, the Beach Boys version all the time. And I think it's one of their last songs that just totally sounds like a hit and still captures the Beach Boys sounding like relatively youthful and young. And I think afterwards, most of their songs in this style would start to sound like a bit of a pastiche of their younger self, whereas this one still sounds like extremely exuberant and polished. And it definitely has a bit of like a Phil Spector wall of sound thing going on with just those great Beach Boys harmonies. So for me, this is probably one of the highlights of the album and probably one of the highlights of the decade. Like it's just they took like a okay song that I don't think is like maybe a knockout song, but the production and performance is just so out of sight that it's a like classic mandatory Beach Boys song now.
Yeah, this is a really strong one for me as well too. It's a really great cover. It's very layered. There's a lot of different layers going on. This actually started during the 15 Big Ones sessions, this song. So it was kind of overdubbed through the years. I don't know if any of you guys have heard the original version. It's missing those drums, at the beginning that kind of just like gives it some lift.
It's a little lo-fi, the original. It's kind of rough around the edges. Yeah.
So I believe those overdubs that they kind of added to it can really add it to the song. And Al's voice is so strong in this song too, as well too. So this is one of the highlights of the album for me as well too.
And I just wanted to add one thing, Nate. A song an example that like you were talking about how like a cover becomes like synonymous for me. That's like the Beatles with Twist and Shout. I think that's
that was that was sort of when I was formulating my words, the song that I had in mind.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Like I feel like especially like, when you're in Ferris Bueller and it becomes that iconic, you kind of made a definitive version.
I think the Beach Boys, maybe tied with the Beatles, are one of the all-time greats, maybe along with Elvis Presley, to make the covers they did synonymous with themselves. Because for me, if I hear "Why Do Fools Fall in Love," "Come and Go with Me," Barbara Ann, I'm almost always thinking of Beach Boys primarily before the original artists.
I love Frankie Lyman's version of Why Do Fools Fall in Love, though. That's a great version.
Oh, absolutely, but that was just an example that came to mind.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And this is one of those songs too, "Come Go With Me," where like I feel like as much as we love we love Carl's voice and we love a lot of the other guys, like I just feel like you can't picture anyone else singing this but Al. I just feel like Al did it so well. I just can't imagine any of the others doing it better. And I love that part, like the "Yes, I need you. Yes, I really need you." Like he just absolutely kills it. So I would say Al's top 5 vocals for me.
He has the right amount of grittiness for it. Because as much I love Carl's voice, but Carl's voice didn't really have that grit. Al's did.
Always ask and always ponder why the band continued in a hoppier and more nostalgic direction. But the public made it very clear what they wanted by making rock and roll music and this big hits. Like the general public was not mincing their feelings as far as showing the band that they wanted the surf pop hits over the kind of artistic ballads.
Right.
Well, I like this. I don't like rock and roll music, but that's another story.
It's kind of crazy that this became a hit like 5 years later. It makes no, like, imagine you work on like not even like a cover song, just like a regular song, and then 5 years later it gets like re-released or something, and that becomes like a pretty big success. That's got to be pretty cool for Al.
It was definitely a stroke of genius to put this out as the single from 10 years. Whoever came up with that idea definitely had the right idea.
That happened with The Sound of Silence. When it first came out, did nothing. Then they remixed it and they made it more like kind of like electric, and it took off.
Yeah.
Justin, I'm shocked that this wasn't a single initially.
Yeah, I would have chosen this one as the single initially.
Well, because
you think it's a no-brainer.
Peggy Sue was a single, but I think this like crushes Peggy Sue.
It does, yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right, so we'll move on to track 3, and this is one that we've talked about plenty on this podcast already, but we press it. So it's "Hey Little TomBoy." So I guess I'll just repeat my thoughts on it again. I think it's a really catchy melody. I think it's one of the more memorable songs in terms of like melodic music on the album. I think it has a really great chorus and catchy verses, but obviously the lyrics are very unfortunate. There's no other way to put it other than they're just creepy and weird and disturbing, and especially that part where like Mike's like, "I'm gonna teach you to kiss." Like it's just very unsettling, and I don't think this is a song where the band would want people hearing this song today. This is the kind of song you get canceled for. But personally, I think it's a catchy melody, and I do come back to it honestly quite a bit. I actually think the lyrics are so bad I almost enjoy it, like to that regard. Like I listen to it just like, what in the hell were they thinking? So I think it's a catchy song, just the lyrics are unfortunate. So that's my opinion on it.
Yeah. This song kind of belongs to that same category of songs that like, this has a really good melody, but it has really crap lyrics, like from like problematic lyrics. Like this, "Run for Your Life" by the Beatles is another one. Prince's "Bambi" is another one where it's like, you have this great melody, but you like kind of ruin it with those lyrics. Yeah, those lyrics are really bad. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Lolita-esque is what it is. Thank God they got rid of that bridge part with the spoken word, because that was horrible. That was on the adult child mix. Thank God they mixed that out. Whoever's decision that was, God bless you, because it was the right one. I also want to shout out though. I love Carl singing like "The Rent Is Due." Time to turn into a girl. I mean, like seriously, like the man could sing the phone book. That's all that needs to be said. But I agree with you, Jake. Great melody. Quite like the production too. It's bouncy, it's fun, but the lyrics are just dreadful.
Yeah.
Everything's good except the lyrics. Yep. I don't have anything new to contribute to that. I think we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely like a quintessential mid-late 70s Brian Wilson type of arrangement, like with the really creative use of the instruments that he's using. And I'll just play devil's advocate. I'm not like huge on this song, but just to provide like a different perspective, I think first of all, like the Beach Boys always sort of sung about adolescence and teenage years. And I think even more so back in the day, there was like a little bit of an acceptance to just take that for what it is. Especially because in a lot of movies and TV shows, you even had older people playing younger people, to put it most simply. And so I think this falls into the vein of a lot of the songs on Love You. And specifically, I'm thinking of I Want to Pick You Up, where I think Tomboy and I Want to Pick You Up are both really unsettling, maybe even inappropriate with like a 2024 lens of being really sensitive to anything of that nature with gender and etc. I'll put it. But in this time of Brian Wilson's life, he was a father, and his girls were like the age that the song describes of going from little girls to adults. And so I think the intention when Brian was coming up with this and whatever Mike contributed wasn't for it to necessarily be pervy in the way that it comes off. I think it was more meant to be fatherly. And we all know that Brian didn't necessarily have the tools or even the words maybe to express those fatherly emotions, especially in the 1970s as he was going through all of his own problems. But I think if you just try to accept everything as well-meaning, like even the teach you to kiss and stuff, it's kind of gross. But if you just imagine like a father saying these things and not like a creeper, it's a little bit more acceptable, I feel like. And not I mean, like most rap songs of modern era are far more inappropriate and misogynistic and grotesque than this, you know? So it's kind of all relative.
I honestly think if a dad singing it, it's a little worse, to be honest with you, but I guess it just depends how you look at it. And as far as the rap thing goes, some of it is, but there's good rap out there if you look for it. Well, I'm probably the biggest
Of course.
I'm probably the biggest rap fan on the podcast.
I make a living off of recording rap music, so I'm not disparaging it, but yeah.
One quick thing I wanted to say, if you hear like that video from 76, that interview with Brian where he's talking about this song, he talks about it like very like he's very proud of it. You can tell he's got like a big smile on his face, and like you can tell like he had no ill intention with it or anything. Like he actually thought it was a really great. And I think he had good reason to be proud of it. Like, I think melodically it's one of the strongest songs he did from this entire period. It's just that the words are creepy, and like you said, I that is an interesting perspective, Nate. I never really have viewed it that way, but I do kind of see how you can tie it in with like, you know, like the adolescent themes and stuff. And I'm pretty sure, Justin, didn't you say like somebody, I think it was Gary Griffin or somebody involved with this album, like they asked him, like, did you guys think that was weird at the time, the lyrics? And he said no.
Yeah, they were just so excited about the music. Like it was just one of Brian's great songs at the time, you know, like they're just so excited to play on it, you know? They didn't really think of that.
Justin.
I have to say, for me though, the first time I heard this as a kid, I was like really young. I was like 7 or 8 years old. This was like 30 years ago, right? 32 years ago, 33 years ago. And it was weird then, I must say. Like when I first heard it, like those lyrics made me uncomfortable. But it is a great track. It is a great, like the backing track, the music. And like we were talking about in the chat too, about like these who was the from the Box Tops?
Alex Chilton.
Alex Chilton. Replacing the lyrics to "Honking Down the Highway." It doesn't even sound the same anymore, you know. Like, so I think if you replace the lyrics to this song, it wouldn't even sound the same anymore. So, like, do we really want to replace the lyrics at that point too? You know, like
counterpoint. "Honking Down the Highway's" lyrics aren't even that bad. They're just maybe a little corny. This is like, you guys have to admit, if you're looking at this from perspective, you know nothing about Brian's mental health. You know nothing. It's awful lyrics. They're awful. I mean, they really are. I'm trying to look at it like that too. Like, I would never in a million years play this for someone out loud if they like knew nothing about the Beach Boys. If I was trying to get them into the, I'm just saying, like, I think you'd turn them off in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Just saying.
No, I think it's one of those things where if you're looking at it from today's perspective, yeah, it's terrible. But again, like if you're looking at it like how Nate was, where it's like at the time, like this was kind of more of just an acceptable thing. Like it wasn't viewed as that weird. I mean, obviously, again, like when Justin first heard it, he was weirded out, but that was a little bit later on.
That was in the 90s. So
right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
late 80s, early 90s. Yeah.
I don't know. I maybe I just have a problem of looking at everything through today's perspective.
No, they're weird lyrics. I'm not gonna say they aren't.
Yeah, I won't deny that either. I was just trying to rationalize how they ended up there and why they left it there.
Yeah.
All right, so the next track in M.I.U. is Kona Coast. So this is a Mike and Al composition, although it borrows from Hawaii, from Surfer Girl.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't really care for this song much. I think it's one of the weaker tracks on this album for sure. Um, I mean, it's inoffensive, I guess. Like the verses aren't bad. It's just they're just kind of there. Like they're kind of just bland. I've mentioned before, I'm not particularly fond of Hawaii to begin with, like the original. So to hear it again in this song isn't exactly my favorite thing. It kind of comes out of nowhere too. Like all of a sudden, it's like, oh, we're retreading Hawaii. Like it starts out this completely different song, and then we're just retreading an old song. So, it's inoffensive, but this is never a song I would like choose to put on. And in the context of the album, I'd still probably skip it. So definitely one of the lesser tracks for me. What do you guys think?
I think I feel the way about this song that you feel about the original Hawaii, where it's like it's just kind of there. I think it's really lame personally. I think it's like a lame, like everything about it's just kind of lame. It's just like it's like a nothing song. And then the Hawaii comes in and it sounds like an old lady singing it. It's like not even sung well. And then they rewrote it as a Christmas song, and that wasn't very good either. So yeah, I kind of agree with you. It's just it's like it's like musical wallpaper. You notice the wallpaper, oh, it's there. Then you forget about it. That's how I feel about the song.
Go to Hawaii.
That's the best part of Hawaii. Don't fucking shit on that
I
one.
love Hawaii. This though is just I don't like that much.
So I don't think it actually comes out of nowhere. If you look at the chord progression, it's very similar to Hawaii. Because you're going from that. I don't know what the exact change is. I think it's just going from the first to the second chord, but it goes from the major, and then you kind of go a full step up, and then you go minor with that chord. That's the same progression they used for the Hook of Hawaii. So it doesn't really come out of nowhere. I don't mind this one. It's okay. I'm a big fan of Hawaii, so it doesn't bother me. I feel like, though, this is in many ways the first step into becoming that truly nostalgia-based band. And for me, I had the same problem with this one that I do with California Calling. It's I like the original song much better, and I feel like they're just kind of retreading on old ideas. But I feel like less than California Calling, I don't think this as bad. I do enjoy it. If I'm listening to the album, which isn't a lot, but if I am listening to it, I'm not going to skip this. I think it's pretty fun. Um, but it's again, I like Hawaii a lot more, and if I listen to this, it's like I might as well just go listen to Hawaii now. But it's not bad. But it's definitely that first steps of becoming that nostalgia based band, and I don't really like it for that reason.
Well, I would argue they already started doing that, but I guess you're right. This like solidified it.
Well, like they're like quite literally grabbing old ideas and saying, "Hey, remember when we did Hawaii in '63?" And
No, that's fair. I also feel like Hawaii is a fairly deep cut, so I don't know how many people really knew that song to begin with.
Yeah, so I actually really love this song, and it would probably be one of my most listened to, and one of the only songs from the album that is in sort of like my regular mix of songs, unless I'm specifically listening to this album. And I think one thing about it that is really interesting to note is that it's their first song, I believe, that is actually more or less lyrically about surfing again since Do It Again. And they sort of returned to the sound of their surf music with rock and roll music and It's Okay. But this is the first time that it's thematically and musically in sort of the original vein of their first few albums. But yet it does have like a unique, a little bit more mellow late 70s flair. And I think if you listened to the Beach Boys in the early 60s before they started getting deeper with stuff like Today and Pet Sounds, if you just listened to the early surf stuff and wondered to yourself what they would sound like in 15 years, you probably would have guessed something like this because it picks up where all the early surf stuff left off lyrically, but sort of keeps in line with like 70s soft rock and isn't really as driving as some of their old songs. But personally, I really like it. And the what sold me on the song was the scene from the Our Team movie when when Al and Mike are writing the lyrics and they're like debating over really like insignificant words, like I think lady versus honey and the skin color of the lady they're mentioning and like all these like really minute details that no one would ever notice, but they're thinking about it very seriously and going back and forth. And so that like that part was just so charming and entertaining to me that I can't help but smile, like listening to the song now, thinking about two grown men sitting there, like with their pens and paper and notepads all over the place, like working as hard as they could to produce these lyrics. It's just kind of funny and it's fun and it's like there's a big category that I would put as like the Beach Boys surf revival. And I would even include some songs that aren't specifically lyrically about that, kind of like Marcella in that category, where it just sounds like a direct continuation of their earlier stuff. Um, and so all that stuff really appeals to me. As I always mention, like certain songs like Do It Again and It's Okay are some of my favorites, and this one sort of I feel like is in that family.
I've mentioned that exact clip you're talking about on here before. I think I said like it's so funny how of all of their songs from this period, the only one we have footage of them working on is freaking Kona Coast. Like, oh my
I
god,
know that
yeah, you
footage is
got
just priceless.
Mike's getting all worked up about the lyrics. She's like, we can't put honey, we can't put. And then at one point, one of them says something like "surfer hottie" or something, and you hear Brian go "no" in the background, which I
Yeah.
thought was funny.
This song doesn't really do too much for me personally. I think the pedal steel in it is kind of interesting. It gives kind of an interesting flavor to this to I guess the song of the album. It's kind of a retread of past ideas, like Riley said. I think they were just trying to appeal to what the buying public wanted at this point. This is one of the newer tracks they recorded at M.I.U. So I think at this point, Mike and Al just thought like, we want to sell as many albums, right? We're sending this off to CBS for the first album. Might as well try to appeal to as many people as we can, kind of thing. So I think that was the intention with it.
And I just realized too, it's one of their first surf songs in a while, but it's also one of their last surf songs, basically, because they wouldn't return to the subject too many more times.
Yeah,
So for the Beach Boys being known as a surfing band, it is an interesting moment in time where they briefly return to it. And of course, there's not a single mention of surfboards or waves on LA, and it becomes kind of more
it's
adult
true. It's
oriented
true.
stuff
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
again.
Yeah, and I think I think when you look at Love You and how like uncommercial that was, and how it didn't do great chart wise. I can see kind of like why they were like, okay, like let's play it safe here. Let's go back to some of those old themes that like, people know us for and stuff. And again, obviously like you guys said, like they're kind of retreading stuff by doing that. You're not going to get critical acclaim by doing that either. But I can see why after releasing a very uncommercial album that was very weird and probably freaked some people out. They're like, all right, let's go back to kind of like our old style of. I can kind of see what they were going for there.
Yeah, the whole album is definitely like a knee-jerk reaction to the extremely experimental Brian's Back music.
Right.
Like it's almost like Al and Mike rightfully or wrongly sort of pulling the reins back into more what they anticipated to be publicly acceptable pop music. And of course, it was a bit of a challenge.
All right, so we'll move on to the fifth track on M.I.U, and this is another cover. This is Peggy Sue. So this was originally a Buddy Holly song, as I'm sure a lot of our listeners know. And I think this cover, it's okay. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I do think it has some energy. Like, I like the part where Carl comes in with the pretty Peggy Sue. I think that's kind of a fun little part of the song. But I do think that this pales in comparison to Come Go With Me. I don't think it's as strong. And I think it's kind of one of those songs where it's like, you hear it, you're like, oh, that sounds nice enough, I guess. And then you don't really come back to it. So I wouldn't say it's a favorite of mine. I don't know how often the band did this live or if they ever did it live, but I would
They did
imagine
for a while.
I would imagine I would like it more live than I would like listening to it on this album. But still, it's just not a song I come back to too often, but it's not bad. So
Yeah, I think you kind of summed it up well. Like it's a fine cover. I don't think it's as good as Come Go With Me. I don't think it's as good as Buddy Holly's original. It's fine for what it is. I don't mind listening to it in the context of the album, but I probably wouldn't choose to put it on.
Yeah.
Kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, I used to be a pretty big Buddy Holly fan. He was like one of those guys, like when I was learning guitar, like he's one of he's actually an insanely good guitarist, and he's like one of the people that I used to learn how to play. And I really liked a lot of his music at that point, and it does pale in comparison to it. I wouldn't not faithful. I don't think faithful is the right word. I think it doesn't do anything as a cover. It's just how you would imagine an M.I.U. version of Peggy Sue. Like if you asked for a Beach Boys late 70s cover, this is what I'd picture. And I feel like if you are going to do a Buddy Holly song, I don't think this is the one that the Beach Boys should do. I'd have to really look to see which one, but this isn't the one. And if you were to do one specifically for M.I.U, I feel like Every Day would probably be better with the little like production on that one.
Yeah.
But it's just like the Beach Boys doing Buddy Holly doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Because I feel like that's more of like a guitar-based guy, and like Beach Boys, I love guitar. I don't think they're really a guitar-based band. And I feel like that's where like Come and Go With Me is a lot better because that's a vocal arrangement, that's a vocal song, and that works for them. And this is Peggy Sue, and it's just like not
Yeah.
really fantastic choice to cover.
Yeah, it's like why the Quarrymen did a really good job of That'll Be the Day, because they were more of a guitar-based group.
Yeah.
So, this is a theme that I will definitely be like returning to a lot when we get to Keeping the Summer Alive and even Summer in Paradise. But I think this is a great track let down by poor mixing. Because I think when you listen to the elements of the recording, the really driving, upbeat instrumental, and Al's pretty exuberant vocal performance, I think it could have and should have come out a lot more in the vein of Cotton Fields, of just of a real rock number. And I think the all the ingredients for a Cotton Fields style mix and recording, and I'm referring to Al's single version with that.
Yeah.
All the elements for that are in this Peggy Sue recording, and it just needs a mix with a bit more balls and a bit more umph, and it could have really been something, but I think it was just let down by a pedestrian kind of mixing style. Like if the drums were more upfront and the guitars were a bit crunchier and louder, it could have all come together a lot more satisfyingly. Because and you wouldn't even have to change the performances that much, just adjust the mix. So if we ever get to
Right.
a box set of this time period, I would be curious to hear that because it's just
That would be
begging for
interesting.
a
Yeah.
it's just begging for a loud, aggressive, again, Cotton Fields style mix, but it's just sort of let down by a quiet, sort of even.
Yeah, I kind of noticed that about this track too. It's like a very like level, like there's not really any peaks or valleys in it or like any sort of like interest to it. But for me, I actually thought that the arrangement was a little bit too much. Like it just sounds like they basically just got into a room and like, okay, these are the chords. We're gonna all play the chords and we'll just make this track, basically. But like Nate said, like that's the kind of like the Cotton Fields driving sound. It's just like a band getting in a room, playing the song kind of thing. For me, I like to hear like a little bit more arrangement to things. I actually don't like the other Cotton Fields as much as I like Brian Wilson's Cotton Fields. So that's my own taste, I guess.
Mhm.
But I would rather they put a little bit more arrangement to it, like not just playing the chords, maybe playing like little riffs or something, playing off one another. So it is more like the Come Go With Me example that we talked about earlier. Another interesting thing I was thinking about, this song was released as a single at the time, and I was thinking about why they released the song. And I was thinking that the Buddy Holly story was a movie that came out around that time with Gary
Mhm.
Busey,
Great movie. Great
and
movie.
it was really, really popular at the time. And I think that they were trying to capitalize on that specific movie,
Yeah,
or could have,
possibly.
yeah.
Possibly. He was
I've heard
also
that theorized before.
he was also Oscar nominated for that movie. It's a very good movie. I
It is a good
recommend
movie. Yeah.
I recommend all of our listeners to go search out that movie. It is very good.
It makes a lot of sense, like with a lot of the late 50s, early 60s nostalgia still kind of being around that time period.
Happy Days and all that.
Right.
Laverne and Shirley. Yep. I think
And
Laverne and
it
Shirley
does
was
make a lot of sense that this one that was released, and it did fairly well for late 70s Beach Boys. I think he said it hit like what, 51?
51 in the US, yeah.
Which is
Another interesting thing too is that McCartney got Holly's songs around this time too.
Oh wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Oh yeah, yeah.
MPL, yeah.
Yeah, he brought and that's how yeah, and then he told Michael Jackson about the publishing, and then Michael Jackson bought the Beatles songs. Yep.
Yeah.
And I just looked it up. Laverne and Shirley was the #1 show on TV at the time, so that goes to show you that nostalgia was really big back then.
I think that's a good point though, Nate. I feel like I would definitely like this a lot more if it was a lot more driving and the mixing was a lot better. I mean, because I think I mentioned when I talked about it, I think it's just like the production kind of like I feel like it same issue with rock and
Flat.
roll music. It's not
Yeah.
there's no hype.
Yeah.
And because when Buddy Holly did it, like I'm sure like it's not going to be like punk rock kind of like level energy, but he brought some of that energy into it. And then when the Beach Boys did it, it's the mixing it's so doesn't sound exciting.
Buddy Holly's version has kind of a cool like thumping energy to it that I kind
Yeah,
of like kind of
Yeah.
a garagey vibe
that's
to
the
it.
like kind of like country like southern like bluesy.
Rockabilly,
Yeah, well, that's the
rock,
term.
rockabilly. Yeah, no, I love his version. So I like a lot of his songs. That one, All My
Yeah,
Love,
he was really
Words
great.
of Love, That'll Be the Day. What's that one?
Every day is
Oh boy, that's going to All
Oh
My
boy.
Love, All My
Yeah.
Kissing. Love that song.
Rave On.
Yeah, he was a great talent that was gone. He would have done if he had lived, he would have done so much cool stuff because he was already doing a lot of cool experimentation in the studio with like overdubbing and stuff. So it's
Yeah.
a shame what happened there.
All right, so we'll move on to the final track on side one of M.I.U. This is Won't You Come Out Tonight. So this song, I actually do really like the melody a lot. Like I think it's a very nice little melody. I think I read somebody said like this sounds like one of those ones where like Brian could just write the melody in his sleep. Like it just kind of just chugs along. But I actually think it's very nice and pretty. The only part of this song I have a problem with is the come. It's a very, very jarring vocal, like that part, like how that opens the song too. I've never liked that very much. I don't know if it's necessarily like the like the fact that there are backing vocals. I think it's more that they sound like that. Like I don't like how like
Mhm.
airing they sound. It kind of reminds me of some of the production on Keeping the Summer Alive, where like you think of a song like Santa Ana Wins, you got like those like very like jarring like Santa Ana, like it kind of reminds me of that too. So but I do think this is a pretty melody. I like the arrangement on it, like the instrumentation. I think it's a pretty song. And it's a nice song. I wouldn't say it's like a highlight of this period for the Beach Boys, but I think it's pretty enough. So I like it.
Yeah, I quite enjoy it too. I think, like you said, it's a very pretty song. I think it's a good way to close out side one. I think it's definitely better than the two that come before it, for sure. We're definitely ending on a decent note here. I actually don't really mind that vocal that you mentioned. I think it's fine. I don't find it as jarring as the opening falsetto and She's Got Rhythm. I think that's far more jarring. Yeah, it's a very pretty song. It's a very calming song. It's got a great melody. I really like it. I really do enjoy it.
Yeah, I feel the same way about this one that I do about She's Got Rhythm. It's a very fun song. I don't think the chord progression is anything like special here. Um, but I really like Mike's vocal
Hmm.
of the verses. I think it's one of his best of the era.
Very understated.
Yeah, I feel like his kind of like that his soft vocals really work with some of these songs, and he's just like, "Little girl, won't you come out tonight?" That's I think he actually does a great job on this one. The vocals were a bit jarring for me at first with the come. Like I think it's very funny, but again, with She's Got Rhythm, I feel like it adds that necessary energy to the song that I feel like some of these M.I.U. tracks do miss is that energy. And even though it's like not exactly like objectively great like vocals, but it adds that like extra kick that you really enjoy it a lot. So I do enjoy this one. I don't think it's anything special, but again, it's very fun music, and I do like this one.
Yeah, so this is the first song on the album that is just Brian and Mike writing together again, even if it was a little Frankenstein, like we talked about earlier. All the other songs before this either are Brian and Mike with others or Al and Mike or so on and so forth. And when you get to this song with those two guys writing together again, it's like, here we are. Like this is sort of like the level of quality of songwriting that we've come to expect. And it's even if they weren't doing it at the same time, like Mike's lyrics and Brian's music always complement each other extremely well. And I think this is like a great example of that. And as for that vocal sound, I think when you take the harmony stack, or let me put it this way, I think that extremely nasal, abrasive sound is what happens when you take the original harmony stack of the five Beach Boys and remove Carl and Dennis, who added a lot of like the roundness and texture, and you're left with Mike and Al primarily and a little bit of Brian, and their voices are a lot more nasally and sort of that cutting trebly type of voices. So especially when you take Carl and Dennis out, you're losing a lot of that roundness and texture and low end. And so I think they were working with what they had and what they could. And I think a few of the backing band guys were probably helping out with the vocals. I think when I was listening, I listened to this album in full today with my fiance as we were driving, and I found myself, and the first half kept saying, like, trust me, it'll get better. Trust me, it gets better from here. And when the calm, she like totally just looked at me and stared at me like, okay, what is it getting better? Like this is rough. But the
Getting
song
better
itself,
all
like I
the
think the
time.
song succeeds in spite of the awkward backing vocals instead of being dragged down by it. Like the rest of the song is good enough that it succeeds, like despite the odd vocal sound. And you do remember the song and sound instantly. Like you hear it once and you remember it because it's so
Yeah.
surprising.
Like, I know there's other songs on this album you can hear that too. Like I love Match Point, but on Match Point the backing vocals have that similar kind of, it's like Match Point, like it's very like, I think they're missing Carl
Yeah,
and Den.
because Carl's late 70s voice was so round and buttery and smooth that I think it probably drowned out some of the nasaliness that Mike and Al were developing. But on
Mm-hmm.
this album, without Carl in the mix that much, it's just oh so apparent.
Yeah.
Um, that sort of twang that Mike and Al were getting into. And for all we know, Brian was such an experimenter with timbres and textures that that could have even been what Brian was feeling at this time, and he could have been telling him to do that. On the previous few albums, they were playing with like the raspy, gruff vocals, and throughout their entire career, they were kind of trying out different voices. So maybe it was just a creative instinct that Brian had.
Yeah, maybe.
One more theory that just popped into my head is I know they threw the studio together, and I don't even know if at any point in the process that it would be considered like a fully functioning studio. Like I think they were literally building the studio as they were making the music. And so maybe they were singing in that way to make the vocals cut through the mix. Because when you think of that old transatlantic voice that the people in films used to do to make their voices cut onto the microphone, maybe the Beach Boys were having to do some of that with the lack of professional equipment they were working with. Maybe they had to slightly alter the way they were singing to get the vocals to cut through.
How did was the studio like set up like in a building? Was it like on a bus? Like how was it? Oh, it
It
was
was
like
in
just in a room.
in the college, yeah, and then the guys were all like staying in like dorms and stuff.
I see. I didn't know if it was like, yeah, Prince used to do this sometimes when he wanted to record a song on tour. He did this for the Two Guys. He just did it in a mobile, like a bus. He just recorded the song.
You could do that too, yeah, yeah. But this was done in a room.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Good to know. Good to know.
They had a
Yeah,
mobile unit after this.
I've read like some people have compared it almost to Holland in a way, and that like they kind of had this makeshift like studio that they just kind of had to put together. I know Holland was a much bigger and more expensive thing because they were shipping all this shit overseas and stuff, so that was a massive ordeal. But
Yeah.
like, and that sounds like it was even more of a pain in the ass to get up and running. But I have seen some people compare the two, like this is almost like Holland Part 2 in terms of like, okay, we're at this place that isn't really made for recording music, but we're gonna do it. So yeah.
Okay, two
And
things
in a
about
way,
that.
they do sound similarly dry and even similarly keyboard driven for what
Yeah.
it's worth.
Two things about that statement. Number one, this is way worse than freaking Holland.
I'm not talking about a quality level.
I
man.
know, I'm just saying, but I had to put that out there. Number two, wasn't a lot of Holland actually not even recorded in Holland because the studio didn't work that much? Like, I don't know if it was like, it's like,
Yeah,
it's like
might have
Bowie,
been recorded away from Holland, but I think didn't they record like the basic tracks in Holland, Justin?
possibly.
Yeah.
Like
So
Bowie's
you could
Low.
say
Like
you could say
Bowie's-
the same about M.I.U. too.
Yeah, it's like Bowie's Low. They call it not like almost none of it was recorded in Berlin, even though it's part of the Berlin trilogy. The only one that was really recorded mostly in Berlin was Heroes.
Right.
But I think you can say the respective environments, whether it was Bowie in Berlin or the Beach Boys recording in Iowa, did have like a very clear like impact on the mood and
Oh,
the
yeah.
feel of all those records.
Oh, for
even
sure.
Even when they went back to wherever they were finishing them,
Yeah, Low is
that
one of my
vibe is kind of captured.
Low is one of my favorite Bowie albums, and Subterraneans, I feel, kind of captures that mood of being behind the Iron Curtain beautifully. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
And you have to imagine too that backing track is like what you stack everything else on top of. So like that, the mood of that backing track, it affects everything. So like what Nate said, like the vibe of what's going on at the time, that it permeates itself in the tape basically. When they initially put those backing tracks, both in Holland and at M.I.U. as well. This song I actually really like. I think it's really sweet and pretty. It has some really nice chords in it. The rough backing vocals are kind of jarring at first. That was kind of jarring for me too. But I think it was kind of influenced by doo-wop. That was kind of like a doo-wop thing. And when you go into the studio and you do these things, you do these like recordings or whatever, and you try a bunch of different ways to get it to sound right to your ear, basically. And I think this was a way that sounded right to Brian's ear, to all their ears. They probably tried it a few different ways before and didn't really work. I can't really imagine it with like softer come on. It wouldn't work, right? So I think Brian and
Yeah, it
Mike's
would probably get lost in the whole mix of everything if it was
right,
like
right.
without those hard vowel sounds.
And Brian and Mike's vocals, as you guys mentioned before, they sound really great on this track. They sound almost like the 60s again, but kind of updated. I think it's just a really great close to side one for me.
Yeah. No, I was just talking with somebody on Reddit recently about like Brian's vocals during this period, because on Love You he has like that really raspier voice, but then on this album, which is only like a year later, he's singing really smooth, and this is one of those songs where like his vocals are really good. Like he's just like real, like from the start, it's like little girl, won't you come out tonight? Like it's just really smooth, and you would never guess that like that's the same guy singing like I don't want to tell you that I care for you. It's so much more jarring on Love You. But I think it was part of it was also just like that was the style he wanted to sing in. I think you said, Nate, like he was kind of trying different voices during this like the 70s period. I think I mentioned on to the person I was talking to that like if you listen to like the demo for Airplane, like the piano demo, he's singing in kind of a wacky voice on that. So I think Brian just liked to experiment with like different voices and sing songs in different ways, just however he was feeling.
The other thing that we're missing too with this album was Dennis and Carl. Maybe he was kind of emulating one of them too. Maybe he was emulating Carl here with like kind of a smoother tone. I
That's
don't know.
true.
Maybe
Yeah,
something
and
to think about.
I shared this in our Al episode, but I have heard a lot of stories relating to the early 70s of Brian laying down maybe a start to a vocal and Al filling it out where maybe Brian's voice was giving out. And so when I listen to these Brian vocals on this album, I kind of almost swear I hear like bits of Al peeking in and out. And so I can picture a scenario where Brian laid down guide vocals for these tracks and either Al or Mike kind of smoothed them out, because there are quite a few moments where it's almost sounds more like a blend of voices than a singular voice.
All right, so we'll now move on to side two of M.I.U. And starting it off is Sweet Sunday Kind of Love. So this is Carl's only lead on the album. I think it's a really pretty song. I don't think musically it's anything too complex. I think I read somebody said it was a similar progression to, I think it was like Be My Baby or some 60s song, but it had a very similar progression to it. So I don't think it's the most like advanced song musically or anything, but I think Carl delivers a nice vocal. He does sound a little possibly intoxicated or under the influence on it. Like I think of like that part, like the cuddle up to me is so heavenly. Like he kind of sounds a little slurry, but I still think it's a really pretty vocal. For me, this is one of the highlights of the album for sure. I do like it quite a bit, and I think Carl really carries the song. I think if somebody else had sang it, it wouldn't be near as effective for me. So I think it was a great choice to have Carl do this one.
Yeah, I think it's a really pretty song, like you said. The vocal is a little, maybe under the influence or whatever, but I still think it's really great. Like I said it before, I'll say it again. Carl could sing the phone book. I mean, seriously, like that guy had the voice of an angel. And I really do feel like he has that earnestness that sells this song really well. I quite like the lyrics too. Like they're a little syrupy, but I do think it's like kind of like it's a song that I think a lot of people can relate to, just spending the day doing nothing with your special someone. And I think it's a great way to start off side two. I'm glad they gave it to Carl. His voice is sorely missed on this album, so it's really, really nice to hear. It's very cathartic to listen to. I really enjoy the song.
Yeah, this is a very pretty song. I think it's very sweet, no pun intended. I like this. I've liked this one for a while. It was one of the first I really liked off this album. I don't come back to it too much, but I don't think it's a bad song. I don't think it's boring either. I just think it's a very pretty song. It kind of the same feelings as Everyone's in Love with You. It's just like nothing crazy, nothing like absolutely nuts going on here. But as a song, it's very pretty, and I can really enjoy it for that. And his vocal, like Matt says, it's classic Carl vocal. He does a great job here. Definitely one of the highlights of the album for me, but not much to really talk about. I don't think there's anything like nuts that like hasn't been mentioned already. It's just a really pretty song.
I think this is you can like draw a line in the sand right here, and coincidentally, you're on the opposite side of the physical record. But I think this is where the album starts to stand steady as its own piece of work, and where you start to sort of get some more tender songs and more heartfelt stuff. I do think most of side two, you could really pluck any of these songs out and put them on early 70s brother albums and they wouldn't sound out of place. And as compared to, you could, if you did that with any of the songs on the first side, they would sound extremely out of place on the brother albums. But most of these songs could kind of fit right in.
Yeah, for me, this is a really great song. I really like that it's really Spectre influenced. You can really tell. Uh, Great vocal by Carl, as everybody mentioned. The one thing that bugs me about this album is the drum sound. I really don't like the drum sound on it. It's just so like flat and like it just lacks oomph. It's just really like it just sounds like they just threw up mics basically, and they didn't really pay attention to like at this point in time too, in the 70s, like people used to spend like 3 days getting a snare drum sound. So it was like pretty crazy likes people would go to at this point, but it just sounds like they just threw it up and just like whatever happens happens kind of thing.
I wanted to
Yeah.
mention I do really like the bridge on this song, like the "Why don't we unplug the phone?" Da-na-na. I like that
Yeah,
part too. Change there.
very Spectre.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I feel like Nate. I feel like this song is like right up your alley.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Speaking of lyrics that nobody would write anymore, unplug the phone. You don't unplug who most people don't even have home phones anymore.
Yeah. I also like the
Unplug it from the charger.
line.
Use it then. Let the
I
battery
like
drain right.
I like the line. We'll read the funnies together too. I feel like that's a very
Oh
like
yeah,
I feel like that's a very 70s line.
A very
yeah.
Brian line. That's a very Brian line.
Yeah. All right, so we'll move on to the second track on side two, and this is Bells of Paris. So this started out as Bells of Christmas. It was going to be one of the songs on the Rejected Christmas album, and I'll be honest, the Christmas version, I'm not crazy about it, but I think it's better than this version, where you got Mike speaking in French. My problem isn't really that though. I just think the song isn't that interesting. I think it's just kind of a whatever song. I don't really like the backing vocals, like the bells are ring. It doesn't sound very good to my ears. I don't think it's the best sounding song on the album, and I think it's one of the lowlights for me. I put it down there with like Kona Coast for me as being one of those songs where like I guess it's not like horrible, but like it's just not one I'm ever going to choose to put on. And I'd say it's the only skip on side two for me. So I'm not a big fan of it, but
I think it's boring, honestly. It's just
yeah.
very boring. It's just kind of there. Doesn't really go anywhere. Doesn't really do much for me. It's like this is the bland adult contemporary slick stuff that I just don't really care to listen for.
Mm-hmm.
And the cringy French, yeah, no, it's boring. It's boring. And if I'm listening to it on CD or digital, I'm pressing the skip button.
I think not much really happens on this one. I like the verses melodically, I think are pretty cool. And I think Mike delivers a fine vocal, like quality wise. But for a Brian and Mike song, this is the most Ron Outback it's ever sounded. Well,
Are you sure?
we'll
Also,
get
because
there.
Outback was a co-writer
We'll
on
get
it.
there. But
Yeah, we will
I
get
think
there.
melodically, I think the verses are pretty good. But it doesn't really move past that. And like I said, for me, for a song to be great or at least entertaining, it can't be boring. And after like 30 seconds, I'm like, all right, that was cool, I guess. But I feel like if this was a Christmas song, I would like it a lot better compared to Bells of Paris.
Well, it was.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I would much
Yeah.
like if they did release that Christmas version, I would probably listen to that like during the holidays. But for Bells of Paris, like I said, like that verse is pretty interesting for 20
Mhm.
seconds, and then the song doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So just kind of gets boring after like a little bit. But I do like Mike's vocal. I think quality wise, another fantastic Mike vocal from the album.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do agree with everything that's been said, and that it's not like the most exciting number. Um, and I guess I've with all these videos and with a lot tonight, I've tried to like draw parallels. And even despite the French words, that isn't even what I'm really basing this connection on. But each of these tracks or this song reminds me a lot of At My Window. And of course, that might just be like how both are not only have French lyrics, but are influenced by French music with like the accordions and the string instruments. Um, but yeah, to me, it is like a pleasant song. And I do think the melody, sort of like Riley said, is quite interesting at first. And then it just sort of repeats and repeats and repeats and becomes a little less interesting. And you guys might be surprised to hear me say this, but I think it's one of the only times that Mike's lead vocal kind of lets a song down. I think his lead vocal is a little flat to my ears at certain points. And for some reason, I could picture, maybe because of the At My Window comparison, but this is one that I sort of could picture Bruce singing and wonder if out of all these songs, if one were to be handed to Bruce, I could picture this being the one. So yeah, I guess that's about all I have to say on that one.
Yeah, for me, I think I've mentioned this song before on our podcast, but for me, it's just boring and bland. It's not one of my favorite tracks. I don't really have anything else other to add, other than what you guys said. So,
Oh man, if Bruce sang this one, I'd have a field day. Bells of
Oh,
Oh, daddy.
we're not making
Oh,
any
no.
"Won't You Dance with Me" references here. No.
No. That was the last album thing. Actually, no, was it this one? No, because he released it in was it June
77, I
77?
think.
Yeah.
Oh
So I should
God,
have
it was
mentioned
around.
that.
I forgot.
Forgot.
Oh, that was around this time. Oh my God,
Yeah,
you're right.
Oh,
I
isn't
guess
that
both
that
him
is
and
part of the
Blondie at the
greater.
same time.
that's crazy?
Yeah.
Brian
Yeah.
Beach Boys put out "Love You." It's great. Dennis puts out Pacific Ocean Blue in '77. That's great. Bruce puts out "Go in Public." Hmm.
And Blondie too at the
writes the
same time.
songs.
I've listened to the Blondie one. The Blondie one's probably interesting, but the Bruce one, oh my God. Like I said before, it sounds like he's singing underwater. Some of the
It does. I think the songwriting is pretty good on a lot of the songs too, but the effects are very strange.
I guess that was the Eventide, right?
The even tide
Right.
harmonize.
Yeah.
Eventide. Like I said, Bowie and Visconti out here pioneering drum sounds, and Bruce is singing underwater. That's all I'm gonna say.
And she says, "Daddy." All right, we'll move on to the third track on side two. And this is "Pitter Patter." This is a Mike and Al composition, and I actually think it's really a lot of fun. I actually do like this one quite a bit. I think it's got a really fun, catchy melody. I love the opening too, like "It looks like rain," like it's like automatically just launches right into it, and you're like, oh, this is kind of a bop, you know. And then it gets to the chorus, like the "Let it rain and we'll be happy," when like it's a really great vocal from Al, great part from Mike too. I just really like this song a lot, and this is one I can remember. I initially like it didn't really do anything for me, and then one day I just re-listened to it, and I was like, holy shit, like this really slaps. So this is a highlight of the album for me, for sure. It's definitely one of my 3 or 4 favorite tracks on here. I think it's a lot of fun, and I think it's one of Mike and Al's best compositions together, honestly. I think it's up there with some of their other ones, so I like it.
Okay, so I have a confession to make. So my sister has a bad habit of sometimes we'll skip a song within the first 3, 4, 5 seconds. She doesn't like it. I used to do that all the time with this song because I didn't like how it started with it. It looks like right. I used to always hit skip, and I actually got roasted on the sub one time for saying that. Went back not too long ago, listened to it, and you are right. It is a bop. It's very fun. I like the pitter patter, pitter patter. It's a very catchy song. It's very fun. Like it's not the most complex subject matter, but it's fun, and I really enjoy it. And I'm very sorry that I was always skipping it before. So, Mike and Al, you have my sincerest apologies. You wrote a banger. I really like it.
Yeah.
I heard I heard the first notes. I'm like, oh, it's just Bells of Paris again. So I often skipped it. Then last year, I listened to it. I'm like, oh, this is really good. And I've been listening to it a lot lately. And it kind of gives me a Friends vibe, honestly. Like I could see this one being on Friends. Like just the kind
Yeah,
of
I can see that.
songwriting style of like talking about rain, and like Friends has a lot of that like mundane, like strange shit that they wrote songs about, and like go like Directions to Your House and like When a Man Meets a Woman and a masseuse, and like I could totally see this fitting in on that. And I really like this one. It is a big highlight for me. Um, I really like that big part where it's like, it looks like rain. And then the song like that whole like chorus part is absolutely rips, and it's one of the highlights of the entire era for me. Yeah, I really like it when Al and Mike kind of get together usually. Well, not all the time, because sometimes they have some like boring shit, but I feel like this is one of those songs that absolutely rips. And I can kind of tell that Brian's in there a little bit. But
Yeah.
I really like this one a lot. It's one of the highlights from the album for me.
Yeah, I love singing along with this song, and the group vocals are like really masterful on this song, and it's like what you'd expect from the Beach Boys. Like complicated vocal parts sort of return here with like the parts weaving in and out of each other. Um, Also, harmonically, it's pretty sophisticated. It like weaves in and out of major and minor keys very, very seamlessly. So you don't even notice all the bizarre key changes that are happening. But they're sneaky and they're there. And the other thing for me that stands out about this song and this song alone as it pertains to this album is on an album of, like Justin was already alluding to, of really crappy drum sounds. All of a sudden on this song, the drums sound incredibly punchy and upfront. And these drums wouldn't even sound out of context on like a modern record today. Like they're very loud and full. And so to me, the drum sound on this is worth price of admission alone. And then you just get a really fun song on top of it with really creative harmony arranging. And yeah, it's definitely a very fun song.
Yeah, I was actually gonna mention something about that on this song. Like, especially here, the first couple hits of the snare in the beginning there, like it sounds a lot better, a lot clearer, a lot there's like a lot more to it than the drum sound on this one. But this is a really fun song. Like Nate mentioned, the inventive vocal arrangement that really catches my ear. Great vocal from Al, of course. Yeah, it's just a really, I'd say this is the highlight of side two, definitely.
And I would add that I think the Beach Boys are quite often at their best in mono, but the call and response vocals really shine with the
Yeah,
stereo
yeah.
effect on this track.
Yeah. I love the part where they're like, and we won't be mad till there's a storm, and then until we can keep warm. Like I love how it goes back and forth, like you said. It's
Yeah.
really, really fun. It's just a fun song. Like this is definitely like the most like you said, Nate, like the one you want to sing along to the most, you know, because like the lyrics are so much fun too. It's just a
It shows
cheesy.
off Mike and Al's ranges really well too.
Yeah.
Like the octave range of the melody is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll move on to the fourth track on side two. And this is one of the highlights for me. This is My Diane. So this is a Brian composition, and Dennis sings lead on it. Questionable subject matter on it. It's about Brian's sister-in-law, who we won't go into the details there, but obviously kind of had a thing for her. But this is a really moving song, honestly. On an album that's full of a lot of kind of cheesy and lighthearted songs, this is a really moving one. Dennis's vocal is really, he's got that like kind of that classic late 70s Dennis voice you expect, like very like worn and kind of raspy, but it really sells this song. Really, you can hear like the desperation in his voice. Just a really moving song. Kind of dreary for sure, like in terms of the production and stuff. Like it's definitely like not a, you know, not like, again, it doesn't fit a lot of the songs that precede it, but I think it's a really moving song. I like it a lot. It's one of my favorite songs from this period. So I love it.
I think this is for me by far the best song on the album. I think it's so heartfelt. Dennis's vocal is so passionate. Like, yeah, it's like a little bit more rough around the edges, like that later 70s
Yeah.
voice, but it's so passionate. You could just feel the emotion in his voice. I think he's drumming on this one because it has his like I like his drum on it. It's like a little bit more like his booming style of drum. I love this song, honestly. Like for me, this is like if I had to pick one song off this album to represent the whole album, it would be this. No questions asked. I absolutely, even though it doesn't really fit in, like you mentioned with the record, I just think it's such a moving song. I absolutely adore this song.
I kind of see this one fitting in more with the adult child style, or at least with the big band stuff, than I do with anything else, which is why I'm kind of surprised that Hey Little TomBoy was the adult child song that made the album. Because I feel like you could have went with a Today route where you have side one has some of those more like upbeat songs of like Pitter Patter, Match Point, She's Got Rhythm, all that. Then side two could be this like deep like ballad heavy thing.
I
But
think
no,
it does kind of turn out that way, nonetheless.
in a way, but it could have been better. You could have had It's Over Now or Still I Dream of It, any of those songs. But no, you picked Little Tomboy. But I feel like My Diane is a huge highlight for that though. And it's that could be where you kind of get that idea anyways, or how it turned out anyways. But this song is incredible. I really like the everything is wrong,
Mhm.
nothing's
No,
right.
right.
And then what's the little tag that happens right after that? Dun,
Memories haunt me night and day.
dun,
Singing,
Shadows hanging
my
over my
head.
head.
that little tag
Yeah.
like right after the everything is wrong, nothing's right part. That's like classic Brian Wilson, and it slaps so hard. Um, this is I don't return this to the I don't return much to this one as much as I used to. Um, but I still think objectively speaking, it's the best song on the album, and it shows that Brian still had it in him. Subject matter aside, great song.
So as I was talking about earlier, played the album from start to front in the car with my fiance today. And I think she made, once I explained the subject matter of the song, I think she made an astute comparison that she thought it was the Beach Boys, um, kind of the Beach Boys, I'm a Creep by Radiohead,
Oh,
like
okay. Yeah.
similar vibe going on. Um, but yeah, I think this is absolutely Brian Wilson still at the heights of his compositional and production abilities. And to me, I would say this is the best uh, Righteous Brothers, Phil Spector style track Brian did. I could really, really see this as a Righteous Brothers song with the very, very slow tempo and um yeah, those booming drums like we mentioned, and just the very slow crawling feel of it to me reminds me a lot of the Spector Righteous Brothers hits from the mid 60s. And I think this is Brian's uh best recapturing of those songs.
Yeah. This song was actually recorded at Brother Studios between 15 Big Ones and Love You, so it has a little bit of a different sound to it than the rest of the album. Like Matt said, I don't think it really fits in with it. It's kind of stands alone. Um, it's a very beautiful song. Dennis's vocal is very passionate. I love the when they rise, their voices rise up there. It's kind of a cool part. Um, I said the last track was the highlight, but I forgot this song was on this album. So I'm gonna say this is the highlight, and Pitter Patter is the second best on this side.
I
I think
agree.
this is one of the most Pet Sounds style songs they made after Pet Sounds.
Yeah, I feel like a lot like you can look like pick out songs that are like very like deep, like emotionally and just moving. And I think of like songs like this and like Till I Die and song like you can just tell they're very personal songs and they come across as personal. And Brian, like this song, it works even though Brian's not even singing it because Dennis delivers such a like almost a heartbreaking vocal on it, you know, like it's like you would think Dennis wrote it, like because like you can hear the emotion and
Yep.
stuff and the delivery and stuff. And you add that like with the production, like with I think like there's strings that come in during the second verse. I really like that as well.
Jake, you
Um
actually brought up a good point. I when I first heard this song, I did like it, but I thought Dennis wrote it.
It does sound like a Dennis song.
it does, yeah.
There's
Um
also the fact too. Why did Brian make Dennis sing it too? That's another interesting thing to think about.
Maybe he didn't want to upset Marilyn. I don't know.
when this song was written, because it was what the song was written like around what
76.
70.
Yeah.
So Brian and Marilyn were still together, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This was
That's
before Let's Put Our Hearts Together.
which makes the subject matter more interesting, questionable. So
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on in Brian's life at that point. I think I've mentioned in the past episodes he had three different lovers. He had Marilyn, Diane, and Debbie Keel. So it was quite interesting.
all right, so moving on to the second to last track on side two. This is Match Point of Our Love. So this song is interesting because it's got like kind of like a disco beat to it almost. It's kind of like one of like the more like disco sounding songs in the Beach Boys catalog. It's not like Here Comes the Night or anything like that's obnoxious. This is more of a laid back kind of mellow, almost yacht rock sounding song. I know the lyrics are really cheesy on this. You know, it's like basically they're using like tennis metaphors to like describe like almost like a breakup or like a relationship like falling apart or but I'll be honest, I absolutely love this song. Like I've listened to this song so many times. Like it's I just really connect with it. I find it oddly melancholic. Like for how cheesy the lyrics are, I think it's mostly the production that really does it for me. I just find it really moving, and I love the use of like the strings and at the like the bridge section, like the no one could ever held me the way you did, like that whole part. I really love that. And then the how could love slip away from me, like and Brian delivers a great vocal on this as well. Like Brian sounds fantastic on this song. So I really love it. Also at the end, like when as it fades out and like Brian's going da 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 da, and you've got like that really pretty guitar line playing and the strings, almost like Philly soul sounding strings. I absolutely love this song. And I think I checked my Spotify. I use this app for Spotify where you can view like your most listened to songs and stuff. And no joke, I think this song was in my top 10 for most listened to Beach Boys songs. That's how much I've listened to it. So I just really connect with this song. It really moves me, and I just really like it. So what do you guys think of Match Point?
I think it's a catchy song. I think it's a nice song, but I do think that the tennis lyrics are kind of weird. This band has a lot of corny lyrics, and these might be some of the corniest, honestly. But it's a fun song. It's a nice chill song. I enjoy it for what it is. I wouldn't say I'm as high on it as you are, but I enjoy it for what it is. It's a nice song. It's a nice tune.
I love this one. Another one like Pitter Patter, where it's like I kind of found it a bit later than I did some of the other tracks that I like on here, but maybe it's because I like Friends. But again, this is another one with the tennis metaphors. I could totally see this being on Friends. And it's just I like some of those like mundane, like out of nowhere ideas to use for a song. And like I didn't notice the tennis point stuff or the tennis match stuff until Jake mentioned it. I just like listened. I just like listening to the song.
Yeah.
And again, like I could see this fitting in on Friends, and I really enjoy it. I think it's very catchy. It's been a long, long while. I don't know
It
who's
is very
singing.
catchy.
It's Brian. It's Brian.
Brian.
That's Brian?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so smooth, I know, but it's Brian. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that's so weird because like you really only hear his voice sound like that on like this song and like this album. Because like once you kind of get to the 80s, you kind of get to that like
Shouting.
yeah, that kind of 80s Brian in my car. Like that kind of like slurred style, I guess. And then like
Yeah.
right before this you have the and it's just
The guttural, yeah.
this is like I did not know that was Brian. Holy shit.
Yeah.
It was like Mike and Al like harmonizing or something.
Yeah. That Friends comparison you made, it's interesting too, because if I've heard like a acoustic version of this song, people have covered it because like I've just been curious. I'm like, let's see if somebody's done this song. And like it actually like almost works like a bossa nova style song. Like if you listen to like acoustic covers of it, you could totally picture this fitting in on Friends. Like not even just
I could
lyrically,
see that.
musically, you can totally hear it. Like if you Google like one of these like acoustic covers of it. So
Yeah, it's a great song. Like this and Pitter Patter as like some of the more of those like mid-tempo upbeat songs. Absolutely freaking rip. And
yeah, it's upbeat yet it's like it's melancholic at the same time. Like it literally moves me. Like I don't know what it is about it, but
you just an avid tennis enjoyer, aren't you?
I'm not though.
Does it move you more than my Diane?
I don't know.
It's okay if it does.
No, it's okay if it does. I'm just curious.
I would say yes because I like when I was listening to this song a lot, it was during a period like where I was kind of having my own issues going on, like in my personal life. So like I think I have a connection to this song for that reason. So I would
That's
say
fair.
yes.
Yeah, that's fair. Like for me, like doesn't come close for moving, but I still like it. I just
Lyrically, no doubt, my Diane is more moving if we're judging it in that way. But I don't
but
know.
even Dennis's vocal for me is just so passionate. I think it's more moving.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm a
Such
big fan of this tune, and I dig it, tennis lyrics and all. I wouldn't change it. It's only appropriate for the Beach Boys to do a tennis song, I guess, after a million surfing songs and a baseball song from the previous year. And so, I guess it's only right that they finally got around to tennis. Yeah, I think it's a really neat song that sort of combines a bit of like a spectorian kind of arrangement with a bit of a disco beat, meets Brian Wilson chords, meets typical Mike Love sport influenced lyrics, let's say, and it all comes together to be a fun song. And I always do like that the Beach Boys lyrics usually don't take themselves uber seriously, and they're happy to make a pun or make a reference or make a joke. Um, in a way not too different from a song like Vegetables that's like filled with puns and little things that might make you smirk. So yeah, I think it's an enjoyable song.
Yeah, for me too. I think that the second side is really stacked, especially towards the end. Uh, this song actually came out of them playing table tennis a lot at M.I.U. So that's why Brian was inspired to write that kind of tennis kind of lyric. The string arrangement is great on this song. I really like the inventive use of strings. There's kind of like spots where you go like it's like really fast kind of uh
Trills
notes.
almost.
Yeah. And the chords are really nice. It's like I think they're minor sevenths in the verses anyways. And also Jake quotes the lyrics to the song all the time. All the time.
I do. So we volleyed a while with small talk and a smile. I've listened to it so many times, man. I also love the last line, like the when it's love's last play, you can only say by the stars above. I like that last line too. So I don't know. There's something about it. Like I acknowledge its cheesiness, but I almost feel like I'm like Riley with it. I'm not paying attention to the cheesiness of the lyrics. It's just like the arrangement, and
it's a good 70s song. Good,
and I've heard it so many times where like the lyrics don't like bother me in any way. Like I'm not like, oh, this is so ridiculous. Like I just kind of view it like it's just a Brian song that's just really nicely arranged and kind of a melancholic subject matter, even with the cheesy lyrics. So I can really connect with it.
I feel like the lyrics are a bit more subtle compared to some like the other cheesy lyrics that they've done, where it's like they're not like tennis.
Balls on.
It's been a long while, like that kind of stuff. Where like there's like subtleties to it, and it's not like in your face.
No, it gets corny when it's like you broke me like a serve and stuff. I'm like,
but like I've never noticed that lyric. I've never.
Yeah, I guess I never thought about it more than just singing along passively.
Well, I will say
Vegetables where they're like chomp. It's like a regular song.
I will say
subtly throw in tennis, and then maybe you might like realize I've never really noticed the tennis lyrics ever.
Yeah, it took me years to actually, as a tennis player, as a lifelong tennis player who comes from a long line of tennis players, it literally took years for that to dawn on me.
Okay,
because I was so distracted by the gorgeous music.
Yeah.
I will say this. I think this goes back to there are certain artists, at least how I listen to music. There are certain artists that I'm expecting. I guess I'm emphasizing the lyrics more than the melodies, and then there are certain artists that I'm expecting better melodies than lyrics. And these guys are one that like, not to say they haven't written good lyrics, but it's the melodies and all that. Like where it's like if I'm listening to Bob Marley, if I'm listening to David Bowie, I'm expecting great lyrics. If I listen to the Beach Boys, I know lyrics are probably going to be corny, but that's fine because like the melody's going to be so good or whatever. And then, I know we went that whole debate of melody versus lyrics. I don't have to rehash that again.
All right. Well, speaking of debates, it's time we move on to the final track on M.I.U. So this is Winds of Change. And so I'm just going to say what I want to say about it, and then you guys can say what you want. So I think paired with the other songs that precede it, you got Match Point, kind of this melancholic sound, My Diane, similar vibe there as well. I think with where it's sequenced on the album, I think it works well. I think it's a pretty ballad. Is it the most exciting musically? No, probably not. But I mean, I think that the arrangement's very pretty. I think the vocals are very nice from Al and Mike. And I think the way I kind of view it is like you think of this period as being a really rough period for the band. There was a lot of fighting going on. It was a very tumultuous period. And like I kind of view this song as being like almost like a peaceful bit of music during this period of complete turmoil. And I think if you view it in that way, it can make it more enjoyable. I also kind of think of it as like this was the last song on a Warner Reprise album for them as well. They're moving on to CBS for their next album, so like they were kind of going through a change at that time, which I think you could also view the song as being reflective in that way. I do like the callback to When I Grow Up to Be a Man at the end, like the Won't Last Forever. I think that's moving. I can see why people don't like the song. I don't really get the complete hatred for it. I mean, I get like, yeah, maybe it's not the most exciting, but I mean, for me, I just think it's just a pretty arrangement and pretty vocal. So I don't really have a problem with it, but I know you guys do. So go ahead.
I think it's really boring. It's just so boring. It's very anticlimactic in my opinion to end the album with this. None of the people in the group even wrote it either, which makes it even better. So it's like the one song they choose that's an original song to sing that they didn't write is so freaking boring. I tried to listen to this again today because you told me about the, the callback to When I Go to a Man. And yeah, I guess that's nice, but it's just so boring. Like, I like ballads, but there's nothing there. It just has no energy. It drags on and on and on. It's 3 minutes long. It feels like 7. I just don't get it. I'm sorry. I know you really like it, but I will never, ever get the appeal of this song. I feel about this song how y'all feel about Celebrate the News. Like, it just does nothing for me. Sorry. I know you like it, Jake. I don't.
It's fair. I get it.
To be to like not like overblow my reaction, to give like an objective view. The subject matter that Jake brought up is a solid point, and I think because Ron Altbach and Ed Tuela, I think that's how you say his name. Nate may be able to correct me on that. Wrote this, and if you see it as an outsider's view on the Beach Boys kind of falling apart around this point, and the "Won't Last Forever" line, I think it's a very sweet intent. And I can kind of understand that. Like, these are two outsiders that have toured with them that have spent literal like years with these guys, seeing things kind of fall apart in front of them. That's a good. I think it's a very sweet purpose for the song. I don't know if that's the actual like writing inspiration, but that's kind of how I see it. And seeing it as the closer to the M.I.U, which the Beach Boys falling apart at this point, I don't think anybody would have been surprised if they broke up right after this album. But song wise, it doesn't do a whole lot for me. This is Ron Altbach at his most Ron Altbach. And I know that works for some people. It does not work for me. No, it kind of like, I don't think it sucks. It's just like, but if you were to say like, what is a song? This is definitely a song. Like, it just exists. It's not bad.
It's like musical wallpaper. It just
Right.
exists.
It's just kind of boring for me. I feel like nothing like crazy musically happens. I think the arrangement's fine for like the chord progression you have. Like, I think it's a fine arrangement, but like musically, like the notes chosen for this song don't do anything for me. The lyrics are fine, but I do kind of see it now as like Ron Altbach seeing the band fall apart right in front of him. So that's kind of my view on it.
This song is interesting for being in a very small group of songs that were originally by the Beach Boys, but not written by a member of the band. Some other ones would be Sweet and Bitter and It's Natural, which showed up on the Feel Foes box set, and some stuff from the 85 album in the future. So there are very few songs where the Beach Boys aren't covering someone and they're singing an original song of theirs, but it's not written by a band member. So that's just interesting to note. But to me, this is one of those songs that I can't really separate from my own like emotional experiences and what aspects of the song have meant in my life. So for me, one of the greatest joys of my entire life has been seeing the current Beach Boys touring band every summer, every year, as many times as I can, whenever they're near me, for a decade now. And at every Beach Boys concert I've gone to, they've always sung When I Grow Up to Be a Man at those shows. And whenever it gets to the Won't Last Forever part, I always end up getting choked up and bawling like a baby. Because for me, it's not only it's just so poignant to see Mike and Bruce in their 80s singing that Won't Last Forever line. And for me, it always makes me emotional because not only is it my favorite band Won't Last Forever, but the joy of getting to go see them with my parents and even all of us, even our parents being around, all of that doesn't last forever. So when I hear that line, whether it's in When I Grow Up to Be a Man or in this song, it just goes right to my heart. Not to be the literal embodiment of the joke Riley made, where of reading into that so much. But I just, when I hear that line, even in this song too, especially with the subject matter of the rest of the song, it just very poignantly makes me think about the fact that we've all been so blessed by this band, you know, for the least of which, I mean, it brought all of us together, you know, like we're all talking and we're all friendly now. And I just think about all the connections it's made for me and for people around the world. And so the idea of it not lasting forever, which it certainly won't, even gets me choked up now. And I'm just so thankful for every year they continue and every new thing that comes out related to the Beach Boys, whether it's a book or a movie or a concert, because it won't last forever. And so it's so meaningful to be a part of this fandom and to meet all of you guys. And so to me, that song just encapsulates all of these feelings. And like you guys have pointed out, it's so poignant given when it was written and when it was released, because things were changing. And with only 5 years, Dennis would be gone. And within 20 years, Carl would be gone. And frankly, the Brian that everyone knew up to this point would pretty much arguably be gone due to the abuse he received from Dr. Landy. So winds of change were really around during this time, and the song expertly and perfectly captures all of that was going on. And so musically, the song isn't the most powerful I've heard, but in the context of the band's story and my own life's experience, it's very impactful.
Very well said. I would say that the sequencing is perfect on this song. Like Jake mentioned, I had never really thought of it that way. Like the end of their kind of contract at Reprise, Warner Reprise, Winds of Change. They're going off to CBS. I really like the piano playing in this song. It's very beautiful. The backing vocals. This song I originally didn't like very much, but I you can leave this in. You don't have to take it out. But ever since hearing that the Tortured Poets Department last Friday, I said I was really grateful for this song, and I'm not going to take it for granted anymore. This is a great song. It doesn't really sound like the Beach Boys, but that's okay. I really like Al's vocal on it. He does a really great job with the song that he has, and it really fits really well at the end of this album. It's kind of like a very quiet kind of closer, and it's just very beautiful. And for the reasons that Nate mentioned as well too, like we won't be here forever, and it does kind of give you that kind of outlook too. So yeah.
It may have been the first time in my life listening to this as a teenager that I really thought about our all of our mortality, which is silly on the M.I.U. album with surf songs and disco
Right.
songs, but
Yeah.
it really did have that impact for me as a kid and when I still listen today.
I was gonna say, I guess it's fair to say that, like, I get what you're saying, and I do love when I go to him, but this to me it just doesn't have the energy. Like, if it was a little bit more energy, just a little bit, I think I would appreciate it more. But to me, it just drags on and on and on. Lyrically, I think it's great, and thematically, I get what you're saying. I just wish musically it had a little bit more oomph to it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think the lyrics are fine, and I know I said like I could see Taylor Swift singing that like last line "Won't Last Forever." I think "Won't Last Forever" is an incredible lyric.
She
Like,
kind of already did on Wildest Dreams. Nothing lasts forever, but this is getting good now.
yeah, but
Oh, true.
but the use of it in "When I Grow Up to Be a Man" is like absolutely genius, and I don't think the use of it in this song is bad. I don't think it really moves me the same way as it does in "When I Grow Up," but like I feel like it's not like in poor use.
I think it works like that because, like, you think about how much the band had gone through since the recording of that song. You know, you think of all of
It's
Brian's
crazy.
based, and obviously the band going like commercially being like at the very bottom and kind of getting back up again. And now when they were recording this, they were at a period where like it looked like the band was going to break up again. I mean, they'd been through so much, and I mean, for me, I combined that with the fact that like I do think the song is moving and I do like the melody, even though it's very slow, but I think that it suits the lyrics well. And I think that as a closing track, I think it's effective. I think outside of the album, I don't know if it's as effective, but I think like closing an album like this, I do really like it as the closer. So, and also one other thing I wanted to mention, I liked the version that I think they accidentally released it when they released M.I.U. like the two first, didn't they put out like a different mix of this where it had more
On the
strings
91 CD, yeah.
I prefer that more because I actually have that one on my Spotify because I prefer that mix more. I downloaded it and put it on there. So
Oh, great. I got to hunt down the $45 91 CD then.
I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who might be able to send the files your way.
All right, so that's M.I.U. But we do have to talk about a few other tracks that were recorded around this time. So we have two different areas we can focus on. We can talk about some of the outtakes from around this time, songs like Our Team and stuff like that, or we can get into the Christmas album that was rejected. So what do you guys prefer to start with?
Let's just start with the Christmas album since that a lot of those songs were basically rewritten for this. I'm just gonna keep it quick with that. A lot of those songs I think are kind of corny. I really do. The two that I really like, well, I really like Winter Symphony. I think that's a really cool song. And then I really like Morning Christmas. I think I kind of like it because it's more ambient. And I've said this before that I really like ambient songs like that. And to me, it just kind of gives me like I've lived in Florida my whole life. I've never seen a white Christmas. And to me, it kind of like just makes me feel like, I know probably for some of you think that's crazy, but lucky. Not maybe, but yeah. So like I've lived in Florida my whole life, so I've never seen a white Christmas, and so to me, it's just like I feel like that's like what like a white Christmas would look like. It's just like the way that like Dennis kind of wrote the song. Even though I know California don't really get those either. Otherwise, like a lot of the songs were like kind of corny. Like I saw Mama rocking around the Christmas tree, and Santa's got an airplane, and then Child of Winter, which I know was technically a single, but it was going to be on there. I would like that song a lot better if it didn't have that Granny Grinch voice, whatever the hell that's supposed to be. The Christmas comes was like, Mama's in the kitchen making turkeys and bread. I don't even know what the hell that is, but yeah. So honestly, for me, those are cool curiosities, but I think they're really corny other than the two I mentioned. So that's just kind of how I feel about the Christmas stuff.
Yeah.
What are you laughing at?
Child of Winter. That's one, like, I know it's bad, but like it's far from boring. So I get a lot of enjoyment out of that one.
It is interesting. I'll give that. And like I just say one thing about Child of Winter real quick. Amanda Green, I always have for years. For some reason I thought I said a Mickey Mouse snowball. And just the other day I listened to it, I'm like, it says I'm making it's because the way his cadence, I'm a Mickey Mouse snowball. It sounds like that. That's what I thought it said for years. And I'm like, it didn't make any freaking sense, but this is the freaking Beach Boys we're talking about, so it doesn't have to make any sense.
Yeah, I'd say these songs being written as
I didn't even get to talk yet.
Oh, my bad.
He's laughing too hard. He can't even speak.
Fucking Child of Winter. That's one I like. I don't have it, but I go to YouTube like maybe like once a week and just like listen to that thing. It's one of the last tracks with Ricky on it with the band though, so I think that's funny. That and It's Okay. I mean, for the Christmas stuff, I don't think any of it's really bad. Except Child of Winter. But I think it's more interesting than like great Christmas music because I feel like for Christmas songs to be good for me, like there's not many great Christmas songs for me, honestly. It's most of the Beach Boys Christmas material. A lot of the like classic like 40s, 50s hits. And then John Lennon's Happy Xmas War is Over, which arguably is less of a Christmas song and more of an anti-war song. But so it's hard for me to like really click with a lot of Christmas music. I think wasn't
Melancholy Maka.
I don't want to say it wrong because I don't want to. There's two Christmas songs with that name, and I much prefer the Jimmy Buffett one. A few Jimmy Buffett songs that I actually like. But wasn't that the one that was Kona Coast basically?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I said that I actually do like it as a Christmas song, but I feel like it's not great. It's not a great Christmas song.
It has some weird lyrics too. It's like Melikaliki Maka is how they say it in Hawaii, Taka or something like, I don't know what the hell.
Yeah, like writing. The cadence is off. It works a lot better as Kona Coast than it does that. Yeah, it's just like it's nothing great for Christmas stuff. It's just hard for Christmas music to really click with me unless it's like that classic nostalgic childhood vibes that you get from a lot of like the 40s, 50s, and I guess 60s hits. And then John Lennon's is just like one of the greatest songs ever written, period. So like, but yeah, it's fun. I'm looking at the track listing. Seasons of the Sun. That was supposed to be on it.
Oh
Yeah.
God, could you
Yeah.
imagine they put that on there?
Oh,
We
come
have
on. I love
nothing.
Seasons in the
No, I
Sun.
like it. I like it, but
It's
it's
a
like
limp. It's limp. It's limp.
I have to kind of agree with Mike. It is a little limp. It's pretty, but it's limp. And they
Right.
actually they removed the backing vocals from the version on Field Flows, right? Because I've heard a bootleg that has the backing vocals.
Right. They did. They did.
But then you get to like Alone on Christmas Day. It's just like, okay. It's all right. Like I could see why it was scrapped. It's not as exciting as the 64 Christmas album. Well, the most exciting song on here is probably Child of Winter. So there you go.
Winter Symphony's pretty good too.
There's no Child of Winter. Dude, if I keep returning to a song that often, it's gotta be good. Come on. Yeah. Yeah. That's my thoughts on Christmas album from 77.
Yeah, for me, most of the songs that ended up on M.I.U, I feel are no better or worse with the Christmas lyrics or the M.I.U lyrics because, like we've talked about, my main attraction to listening to them anyway are the arrangements and the harmonies and the production. So to me, they work with Christmas lyrics or the lyrics that they had on M.I.U. But the highlights for me of all this Christmas material, without a doubt, Winter Symphony, I think is one of the most brilliant pieces of music Brian ever did. I think it's, for me personally, as good and as impacting as anything on Smile or Pet Sounds. I just think the horns and the synthesizers and the chords, all of it are so unique and fascinating. And then my other standout would be Alone on Christmas Day. This version is really almost like a demo. And I'll admit this version of it doesn't do that much for me, but the final product, the produced version that Mike released in 2015 and then put on his 2018 album, really solid, like great Phil Spector type production that elevates the song to where it should be.
So I should
Those would
mention
be,
before I say my thing, I forgot to mention the track listing for this, what it was supposed to be. So uh for our listeners out there, it started off with Christmas Time is Here Again, Child of Winter, Winter Symphony, Michael Rowe, The Boat Ashore from 1976, uh, Seasons in the Sun, Morning Christmas, Alone on Christmas Day, Go Get That Girl, Here Comes Santa Claus, I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus, and there was a medley at the end, like an Xmas medley. So for me, I think we've talked about it on this podcast before. I'm not really a huge fan of Christmas music. I think we talked about it in December when we first started. Um, there's only like a few select albums that I will listen to around the Christmas time, just from working in retail and uh, restaurants and stuff over the years. You just hear it all the time around Christmas. So the last thing I want to do is put on a Christmas album when I come home. So uh, keep that in mind when I say these comments. But this album for me, I had the bootleg years ago. The Making Waves one. It was pressed in Canada here. Uh, and it never really did anything for me. It was kind of a weird, like it had really bad sound quality too. It's kind of
it
eerie
does.
and like, yeah, it's kind of eerie and like, I don't know, it just didn't really give me good vibes. So I only really listened to it a couple times and that was it. I never really came back to these songs ever again. But I do know Child of Winter because I had the 45 of that as well too. And Winter Symphony, I think, was the flip side on the 45 I had. So those songs I'm familiar with, but the other ones I can't really remember too much about them because it's been so long since I've heard them.
Go Get That Girl was never repurposed outside of these
Oh,
Christmas because
that's actually a good song. I re-listened to that again today when we were preparing. It's kind of like a Chicago kind of style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the Beach Boys because there's two recordings of it, right? Because the Beach Boys have a version with Carl on it. Was that
Right,
the
right.
one that did?
That's
And then,
the one that I was listening to. Yeah.
yeah, no, that one's good. And then Celebration has a version too, don't they, or something? Where it's
yeah,
like,
you're right.
my general thoughts, I can see why this was rejected. Like, there's
You
a
can,
couple
yeah.
of nice moments. Like Winter Symphony is definitely the highlight for me. That's a great song. I love the arrangement. Like you said, I think one of you guys, I think you mentioned maybe Nate, like the horns on that are really cool. Just a really like well produced song, and I think it's leagues above a lot of the other stuff that they had on there. Like the Loop De Loop, Santa's Got an Airplane. Like that's not like I don't know. I've never gotten the appeal of the original to be honest, but yeah, like it just sounds so. And then they also rewrote Help Is on Its Way as a Christmas song too. I forgot which one that was, but again, that's kind of a weird one. Morning Christmas is, I mean, it's moving for sure because like Dennis's vocal and stuff. I haven't listened to it enough to like really judge it. Like so far, it hasn't done too much for me like musically, but I could see it growing on me. But there's some really weird ass stuff on here, like the I Saw Mama Rocking Around or whatever the hell that is. That's a weird ass song. It's just very, it comes off as a very like uncommercial Christmas album because again, they were like reusing stuff from the past, like Help Is on Its Way and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And then that's a very weird track list too. The fact that like Seasons in the Sun is on there, like what the hell is that doing on there? You know, like, I don't know. It has nothing to do with Christmas whatsoever, and it's a limp version of it. So I don't know. I think it was rightly rejected. I think that was the right move. I would probably rejected it too at the time. I would have been like, hey, try again, you know. So
It's definitely a love you adult child era Christmas album.
I didn't comment on Child of Winter because I want to again. Yeah, I hate it. I think it's stupid. I will say the part like the part where it gets to like what the F, where I just start like almost laughing at it, is like when like after the first chorus or the first verse, like the Child of Winter, and then it just randomly goes into Here Comes Santa Claus. Like it's just like so out of nowhere. And then yeah, the part where Brian comes in with the weird voice, kind of like what he was doing on Mount Vernon and Fairway, that thing. Yeah, it's just a weird ass. And I mean, I don't know what they thought the commercial value of this was. Again, I think they released it too late for it to even do
December
anything.
23rd or something, like literally
Yeah,
like
so
2 days before Christmas.
It's almost like they knew it had no potential. So they were like, fuck it, let's just put it out 2 days before. It's not like anyone's going to listen to it anyway. So
maybe it's a good thing people didn't listen to it.
Imagine hearing this in like a retail store around Christmas.
Oh God, Riley, what do you like? You like Phil Spector's Christmas album? I think that's another classic too.
Yeah, that's like there's
Yeah.
a handful of Christmas albums I do like. The Beach Boys one, the Phil Spector one, most like the 40s, 50s hits. The really melodic stuff. And like it's kind of that like because for me it takes me back because both my grandmothers really loved that music. Like I remember like play a lot of like the Burl Ives kind of stuff. And I just have a lot of nostalgia for that, and it really brings me back to like being like super young at like 4 or 5 years old, because we would always go up to Maine and New Hampshire and like go Christmas shopping. And I remember like the 3-hour car drives up, like whether I was in the car with my parents or maybe we're in Maine and we're driving to like different stores and stuff. It was I would listen to that music, and that's why like it really clicks with me, and like that's why a lot of modern Christmas music doesn't really click with me. It's like I don't care for it. It doesn't really have that same effect on me where it's like, yeah, it's Christmas time, but like, are you making me feel like I'm a kid again? Not really. And this stuff on the other hand, wow. It's just like Child of Winter especially. Like I for the appeal for me, it's like it's so fucking stupid and like it doesn't appeal to me as Christmas.
It's so bad it's good, basically.
Yeah, like I can't. It doesn't appeal to me as Christmas music. It appeals to me as just like this shit sucks.
Yeah,
I would say it's like it's a fascinating document, I guess, to listen to, just because like how out there some of this stuff is, and the fact that they thought that this was. I'm not surprised Warner rejected it because I wouldn't probably have put it out either.
Like a lot of this stuff is like the outtakes, like, but not even like Big Sur 1970 or like Wouldn't It Be Nice to Live Again? It's like Help Is on the Way outtake.
Oh, Sweet Something.
Right, like those outtakes repurposed as new songs with Christmas lyrics, and it's like they damn well knew what they were doing. They're like, this shit sucks.
Yeah, and it just feels half-assed, like the loop-de-loop flip-flop.
Santa's got an airplane.
Like I feel
under
like
the stars or something like that.
You know what's funny though is on Spotify, you know they have the graphics for the songs.
Yeah,
they have like the regular like graphics.
Yep.
But then they actually made new ones for these songs, which I think is so funny.
Oh,
really?
Like you have graphics for like it's like them repurposed with basically repurposed like the songs were, but with like Christmas hats on them. It's funny.
That's
so
funny.
if you go on the like the Christmas with the Beach Boys like double like album with like the white cover, and you go to songs like Mela, I don't want to say it wrong, but you know what song I'm thinking of.
Imaka.
Have that like graphic, and then you see like Mike Love with like a Christmas hat on, which is I thought was funny that they chose those for this random compilation, but then you go to albums like Love You or something, and it's just like the regular album cover. I think it's funny.
Maybe because it was released on a Christmas album with the good Christmas album. It's like written as like
more people listen to it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's probably true. And they just like, oh, it's all Christmas music, so let's slap that shit on.
Let's just lump it together. Okay. Moving on.
So before we get into the outtakes, I did just want to quickly share this. So before we recorded, I remembered that last year at some point I attempted to because I've always thought Hey Little TomBoy kind of sounded like with like the sleigh bells and stuff, it kind of sounded like it could be a Christmas song. So I attempted to rewrite the lyrics to it last year, and I found my comment. So I'm just gonna read it to you guys. Here's what I just did the first like verse. So here's what I wrote. I wrote,
Yeah.
Hey, little Saint Nick, sit upon his lap. He's got gifts that he's gonna bring you. A brand new skateboard, a bat and a baseball mitt, new toys, and some candy too. When it's Christmas, it starts to snow, snow, snow. All the children have such a glow, glow, glow. It's Christmas time all over the world. And then it's just, hey, little Saint Nick, bringing gifts to all boys and girls. Hey, little Saint Nick, it's Christmas time all over the world. That's
not bad.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
like
could
that.
see that. I don't know if you guys will be able to see this. I pulled it up.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
that's cool.
And it's got an airplane.
I don't use Spotify, but that's cool.
Keeping Christmas alive.
Keeping the winter spirit alive. All right. You want to move on to
Let's get to the outtakes. Yeah.
the outtakes. It's quite a list, right?
There's a lot of stuff.
Maybe I'll just talk about the ones that I liked that I was listening to. Our Team, a little cheesy, but it's fun. Go and Get the Girl. I really like that one. I thought Carl had a good vocal on that one. Looking Down the Coast had interesting lyrics about a women's breast or something. I don't know what that was about.
Oh, is that considered this?
I don't
era?
know. I was just
Okay.
I was just going down the list Justin made. I don't know.
I think it's closer to L, isn't it?
I don't know.
That was between M.I.U. and LA. I did two lists. I did the outtakes for M.I.U. and then between M.I.U. and LA.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got
Then
it.
there's
got it.
Egypt, which is like the nice instrumental. It's a very nice instrumental.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That was I think I don't think there was anything that really stood out as an amazing outtake to me. Like I thought some of the songs were fun. Some of them were like a little bit of like the one was like a little fragment, like how's about a little bit of your sweet love, and that was like
Short, yeah.
that was short as all hell. I think, like I said, there like some of them were pleasant listens, but there was nothing that really stood out to me. Like as Riley mentioned, there's no, I do. There's no Oh Sweet Something. There's no Wouldn't It Be Nice to Live Again. There's no Big Sur. Like there was no like outtake that really grabbed me. That what I listened to. I thought like a lot of it was pleasant or nice, but nothing really stuck out to me as like this is like an essential outtake, if you know what I mean.
I think Carl's Go and Get That Girl is incredible.
That was good. I like that one. I like that one.
That one's like I was shocked that didn't make M.I.U. or I think the Why Egypt instrumental is really cool, but I feel like that was intended to be a regular song and it didn't have any lyrics. So had it been finished, I feel like it would have been really good. But besides those, and Looking Down the Coast, this version knocks the Keeping Summer Alive version out of the water. To be fair, the Keeping Summer Alive version kept the vocals and just redid the backing track, and they did that song backwards, if I remember correctly.
Do you mean Santa Ana Wins?
Fuck yes, I do. Santa Ana Wins. Looking on the Coast is a lot of fun. I'm glad Al did eventually release that one. And I think I told this to Jake a while back. Like Looking on the Coast and Santa Ana Wins would have been a really fun California Saga Part 2 Electric Boogaloo. I feel like it's a lot of fun. I really like it. They work together. They work well together, better than they do apart. Although to be fair, the Keeping Summer Alive has the Santa Ana Southern California has a cultural phenomenon known as Santa Ana Wins.
The most Al thing ever.
Al and his spoken word bits are so fun. I love it. But yeah, besides those, I guess those four, the outtakes really speak to the time. Yeah, like this is a kind of a tumultuous period for the band, and they have a lot of like infighting, and the songwriting wasn't at their peak. They kind of dipped in quality here. I do think it got better with the next album, and in general, it did get a bit better from here. Because if you guys know me, I like a lot of the 80s material. I'm a big fan of LA. So I do feel like that this period has kind of made it hard to write songs in general, not just for Carl and Dennis. Well, just the band in general, like Brian was having trouble. You're getting to the point in Brian's life where shit's about to get real rough. And like to the point where they had to bring in Dr. Landy again. And that's a whole separate topic and discussion. It's a rough part, and it shows in the songwriting. Not that there's not any great songs, because there are, but I feel like after this, things kind of pick up a bit. And I'm not a big fan of Keeping the Summer Alive, but besides that, I feel like songwriting is going to get good again. They kind of get their second wind, but it shows in the outtakes that like it's not like 1970 where you have 60 songs in the vault that are like, holy shit, why wasn't this recorded? It's like I could see why some of these were outtakes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say stuff I like from this era that didn't show up on this album. Two standouts that showed up on the Celebration album that I think are classics and could have been great Beach Boys cuts are Almost Summer, obviously. I think that's like a real standout of the latter half of the 70s. And I really, really love Mike's Sad, Sad Summer. I think that's a really, really gorgeous song that could have been done very well by the Beach Boys proper. So yeah, I'd say those to me, really that whole Celebration Almost Summer album kind of feels like a lost Beach Boys album. Not only because of Mike's involvement and Brian and Al's to a lesser extent, but the fact that all those guys were playing with the Beach Boys on stage or with the Beach Boys in the studio. So there's like a lot of overlap there. So Almost Summer and Sad Sad Summer would be my two standout tracks that from this era that weren't on M.I.U.
I think for me, it's tough because not a lot of these tracks are any good. The ones that circulate anyways. I think Our Team would have made a good B-side as the single. Like if they put out Come Go With Me back with Our Team, that would have been a great single. Might Come Back to LA is kind of just fragmented. We don't really know what that's going to sound like by the time it got finished. How's About a Little Bit is kind of fun, but it's very short. But it is a fun track. Go and Get That Girl is probably the strongest out of all of these. Sounds kind of finished. Egypt Why is a really pretty instrumental that would have made a great track if words had been written to it. We don't know if they have been. I guess we'll find out in a few years. Everything else. Looking Down the Coast is fun. Santa Ana Winds it's a great version versus the Keeping the Summer Alive version, the version they did here. Everything else is kind of like unbooted, so we don't really know what some of these other tracks sound like. So we have Beach Burlesque, which is supposed to be Burlesque, which is the song written in 1972 by Jack Riley. It's just an instrumental version, by the way, too. We have advertisement for a TM CD program by Mike Love, promoting the CD program in Switzerland. We have a track called Carl's Shuffle. This is in between M.I.U and LA.
Be true to your bud.
We have
turned up on a recent Dean Torrance album.
There you go. We have It Could Be Anything, which is supposedly a Carl song.
Oh God.
We have two Brian songs called Bowling and Basketball. These are backing tracks. And then we have two songs from Al called Ruples and Ride Arabian Ride, which would be kind of interesting to hear. Yeah, that's it.
I'm gonna put money down now that they're probably not that good. I don't know. I just feel like this era was.
I love that Brian is writing songs and labeling them after sports. I love that. I know that.
Match point, basketball, baseball's on.
Yeah.
Hell, even
Our
surfing
team
safari.
Bases.
I guess.
Oh man, I love that. There's a song that was called Basketball Rock. It's so fucking funny.
Yeah.
Looking at this list, yeah, I kind of agree. Like there's not too many highlights here. Like I can kind of see why a lot of this stuff was kind of like left in the can. I do like Our Team. I kind of agree with you, Justin. I feel like that would be a kind of a cool B-side. I think it's got kind of a fun little melody, and I like all the girls in the stands and all of our fans. Like it's kind of got like the sports theme again. So obviously that was kind of on their minds at the time. I also really like Egypt, or Why, whatever you want to call it. I really like that instrumental a lot. It would be interesting to hear what that would have sounded like with actual vocals. But I think it's pretty as it is. Go and Get That Girl, definitely a highlight for sure. A lot of energy to that song. Carl, great lead vocal as always. I love the horns on it and like the verses. Like Carl like really sings the hell out of it, so I think that really works well. Um, Looking at the rest, I do like Almost Summer, as Nate mentioned. I know that was from the Celebration album, but I do think that could have been like a good, like almost like a lost Beach Boys track. I feel like the song was strong because it still went like top 30, I think, on the US charts under the Celebration. So clearly, like the song had commercial potential, and I think it's really catchy. That video of them doing it on I forgot what show it is, but it's interesting.
Mike
like,
Douglas show, yeah.
Brian's really into it. Like I know they're just like lip syncing to it, but like Brian's like, he's got the bass and he's
rocking
like
out, yeah.
He's really enjoying it, yeah. Besides that, not too much else here. Like you said, some of these are fragments, like Might Come Back to LA. I do like Looking Down the Coast if we're gonna count that. I think that's a cool Al composition. I think that would work really good with Santa Ana Winds because I think they're both really strong songs. And I love like the part like from Looking Down the Coast, like the "This must be Monterey." Da, da, da,
Yeah,
da.
it's magical.
Al's delivery is just so good on that. So yeah, but overall, I can kind of see why a lot of this stuff was left off the albums. It's definitely a very inconsistent batch of songs. I would say more often than not, they are kind of just like, oh, that's a curiosity, but a few nice moments for sure.
I forgot to mention I love Almost Summer. That's one of my favorite Celebration tunes.
Oh, it's fun. So much
not as
fun.
good as their version of Getting Hungry, but
disco.
Oh, yeah.
That version slaps. But that came out in '79, so we'll talk about Disco Getting Hungry when we do what?
That was the second one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that when we get to LA. But Almost Summer slaps. That is such a good song.
Yeah,
I feel like
chord progression.
Lyric is a very dated line though. It's like I think it's like Susie wants
lady
to
director.
Lady director, like a lady director, like
I know. Yeah, but then I really like the pack
director?
your bags, pack your books.
Giving the teacher dirty looks.
I could see Mike going like,
I think
you know how he does all that like hand motions.
In the Celebration performance, he's doing stuff like that.
Oh, I'm sure he is.
All right, so now I do want to get into real quickly, not for too long here. Just some critic comments about this album. So as a lot of us know, this album did not get good reviews, as I mentioned earlier. Got some very harsh words from critics. One music critic called the album, he said it was so dreadful that its pitiful content was ignored. Rolling Stone's Tom Carson, he said M.I.U. seems contrived and artificial right from the start. The tracks strive to recapture the dreamy adolescent innocence of the Beach Boys' earliest hits and fail not so much because the concepts are dated, but because the group can't infuse the new material with the same sense of grandeur that made the old songs such archetypal triumphs. Throughout, the lackluster playing and singing has a melancholy edge, almost as if the Beach Boys are fully aware that they've outgrown this kind of teen fantasy, but can't think of any place else to go. So that's a pretty depressing, harsh review there. I do agree that there is that melancholic vibe, but I don't really like, he's kind of viewing it from a more negative perspective though. One positive review from somebody this is from Vivian Goldman of Sounds. She found the album to be magic and added that she played it nonstop, even if it seemed a baffling, sconed adolescence, before concluding, if there weren't some weirdo psychological reason, how could I get so involved with lyrics that one part of mind is consciously saying, this is moronic drivel? I thought that was funny. Let me see if there's anything else notable.
Dennis had like the harshest review of this one though.
Yeah, yes, Dennis was the biggest critic.
The hopes that karma will fuck up Mike Love's meditation forever. This album is an embarrassment to my life. It should self-destruct. That was
what would have happened though if Mike learned to levitate? Would Dennis have said the same thing?
What if he did? We just don't know.
I think he did. Hey, he's made it this long. He's doing something right.
Yeah, he is.
One other really harsh one, Peter Ames Carlin. This was from Brian's biography that he wrote. I actually remember reading this because I read the book and I remember when this came up. Is that this is what he said of M.I.U. He said the most cynical, spiritually void work the group ever produced, a gruesome album, and perhaps one of the worst records ever made by a great rock band. Which I mean, I feel like we're kind of ripping at it a little much there. Like again. I understand it's not like probably objectively a great album, but like I feel like that's more like judging it from like the period it came out rather than like the music itself. I mean, the music itself to me is at worst inoffensive, I feel like. So I don't, I just feel like that's a very harsh,
Yeah, it's not even the worst Beach Boys album. How can you label it like with the worst like
After you hear 50 covers of Good Vibrations, you're ready to hear M.I.U. It's so much better. Like, oh my God.
after you hear Tortured Poets Department, you're ready to hear M.I.U.
There you go. There it is.
What about our best friend Kreisgau?
Oh,
Tortured
well,
Surfer Department.
Price Scott said he called the album dumb, despite a lot of fairly pleasant music and a few passable songs. So,
What was the grade he gave it?
A C. He gave it a C.
Oh, okay.
So not the worst. Could have gave
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
That's pretty generous, actually, from him.
Honestly, yeah, that is pretty generous coming from him.
the last one I'll read. This is from the AV Club. Keith Phillips. He said, "M.I.U. is competent enough, but it's also the sound of a group buying into its own mythology. A retrograde salute to the pinstripes and sunshine image it had abandoned years before."
That's interesting. It sums
Which
up a lot of what we said in like two
Not
sentences.
wrong. Yeah, it's not wrong.
But I think it really comes down to like your tolerance for that. Like I know, like Nate, like you can appreciate them like throwing back
Super high tolerance. Yeah.
right. You're like, oh, Kona Coast, like all right, like we're going back to the surf sound. But I mean, yeah, I mean he has a point for sure, and I think I agree with him to an extent. But I also think like I feel like you can't overlook that. Like there are some nice moments on the album for sure. And I think like a song like My Die, completely separate from that retro. Like that's Brian just writing a really deep ballad. So. I can't really tie that into like we're chasing nostalgia. Like a song like that, that's just a really just moving song. So
Yeah, it is tough though, because like I feel like a lot of these songs, when you force somebody to write a song, they're not always going to come out very good, and especially somebody this late into their career, it's not going to come as easy as it used to. Yeah, like just like for myself, like it's really hard to force stuff, and then when you do it for 15 years at this point, it's gonna get hard. And you're not going to be able to write all the same like high level stuff that you used to be able to. Not that you can't, but it's not as easy. And that's why you get a couple of like really good ones, and then you get a couple of Bells of Paris. Like,
and sometimes when you force somebody to write a song, they'll come up with something completely different. Like, have you ever heard the story of when Lou Reed worked for Pickwick Records? They forced him to write a song about surfing. And he came back with Heroin, like the Velvet Underground song.
Well, I feel like that's why that's why it's good for artists to change styles down the line. And then when you kind of, for the Beach Boys, I mean, they did change a lot of styles, but they kind of fell back to that contemporary sound. And it's why some of these like sound a little bit forced.
yeah.
Yeah, I think all the post 15 Big Ones albums do have one foot in the nostalgia lane and one foot in trying to be artistic. And therefore they all have brilliant moments and some cringeworthy moments, but I don't think I'd change the catalog. Like I love it for what it is. And the warts and all aspect of it is what makes it so fun to talk about and hear your guys' like unique opinions.
Well, yeah, because you think of like the Beatles, and like obviously the Beatles are a great band. I mean, they're the band that really got me into music, and I listen to them, a ton. But they don't have as many of those like warts and like those like moments where it's like where like with the Beach, there's such a wide range in like quality and just like different stuff throughout their catalog, and I think that just makes it, like you said, it just makes it a lot of fun to discuss because it's like you like. With the Beatles, like, yeah, sure, maybe some of the early albums people are kind of split on, but like once you get past a certain point, it's like, oh, this is a masterpiece. This is a masterpiece. Where like with the Beach Boys, it's like, we're debating like the credibility of like M.I.U. or like Still Cruising and stuff like that. I just think it's funny that like, we have such a variety in this band's catalog. I was just texting the guys in the group chat recently that like I went on a bike ride and I had my Beach Boys playlist on shuffle, and I went from like God Only Knows to like In My Car. It was like all over the place, and it was just so funny, just because it's like you go from one completely different sounding song to another. So
that's the fun of it.
Yeah.
To
me, that's the biggest selling point, I think, of the Beach Boys. Like I was hooked by the big hits and the gorgeous harmonies, but then you stay for all the unique, one of a kind songs that you'd never hear from any other group or artist,
for good or bad.
Yeah.
Come on, we already talked about that. All right. Do we want to wrap it up there, guys?
Yeah, that was a great discussion.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for listening to this 21st episode of Good Timin'. I hope you all enjoyed the show. I had a great time discussing M.I.U. and all the other outtakes and tracks from around this time. And I hope that our conversations today have encouraged some of you listening to give M.I.U. another listen. Again, it's far from being a perfect album. I think we would all agree on that. And it's certainly not a highlight in the band's catalog. But I still think it has some really fun and enjoyable tracks that are worth listening to. So I hope we inspire you all to give it another listen. So as always, if you like this podcast and want to hear more, feel free to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. We greatly appreciate the support as it motivates us to make more episodes in the future. Also, as a reminder, the podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So there's plenty of different places to listen and keep up with the show. So thank you again, everyone, for listening, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.